People often lie without a clear reason. Lying is an instinctive behavior that many people engage in, often without even realizing why. It's not always about protecting oneself from consequences or gaining something from deception. Sometimes people lie simply because it feels easier or more comfortable than facing the truth. The lies can be trivial, like exaggerating a story to make it more interesting, or even pretending to agree with someone to avoid conflict. In many cases, the person telling the lie doesn't even benefit from it. They may lie to avoid feeling vulnerable or to conform to what they believe others expect. It's as if the lie becomes a defense mechanism, a way to navigate a world that feels too overwhelming or judgmental. The unsettling part of this behavior is that lying becomes so ingrained that people start doing it unconsciously. It's a pattern that begins in childhood and continues throughout adulthood. Small lies stack up, creating a web of deceit that becomes difficult to untangle. Even more disturbing is that these lies are often not about avoiding punishment or gaining rewards, but about managing how others perceive them. It's as though, for some, the truth isn't enough. They crave the control and validation that comes with manipulating reality, even in subtle ways. This behavior touches on the uncomfortable reality that trust, something so central to human relationships, can be easily shattered. When we lie without purpose, we reduce the value of our own integrity and poison the connections we have with others. It's not always malicious, but the emotional toll it takes on both the liar and the deceived is immense. The more we lie, the further we distance ourselves from genuine connection, leaving a trail of emptiness where truth should be. Judging others based on appearances is natural. From the moment we are born, humans are conditioned to make snap judgments based on appearances. It's not a conscious decision. It's a survival mechanism ingrained deep within us. The way someone looks, whether it's their facial expression, body language, or the clothes they wear, sends out immediate signals about their status, emotions, and even their potential threat level. This judgment isn't something we choose. It's something we are biologically wired to do. Our brains are constantly scanning the environment, categorizing people in an instant based on visual cues. We assess everything, from the most obvious traits to the smallest details. Are they well-dressed or disheveled? Do they have a welcoming smile or a harsh frown? This automatic tendency to judge is rooted in our evolutionary need to survive. In ancient times, being able to quickly gauge whether someone was a friend or foe based on their appearance could mean the difference between life and death. However, in today's world, this primal behavior often leads to distorted perceptions and harmful stereotypes. We may see someone's clothes and automatically assume they are wealthy or impoverished, or we may judge their physical features and decide they're untrustworthy, all based on nothing more than surface-level observations. What makes this truth even more disturbing is that people rarely question their judgments. They become trapped in these initial perceptions, reinforcing biases without ever challenging them. It's easy to dismiss someone based on their looks, but what we fail to realize is that these superficial judgments can destroy opportunities for connection and understanding. We reduce people to their outward appearances, missing the depth of who they truly are. In the end, judging based on appearances only deepens the divide between us, trapping us in a cycle of prejudice and misunderstanding. Most people conform to groups, not independent thought. Conformity is a deeply embedded part of human nature, and it's one of the most disturbing truths about how we operate. Despite our beliefs in individuality and self-expression, the reality is that most people will abandon their independent thinking when placed in a group. The pressure to fit in is overwhelming, and it's often more compelling than staying true to personal convictions. Whether it's in social settings, workplaces, or even in political or ideological movements, people instinctively adjust their views and actions to align with the majority. This need for acceptance is so strong that many individuals will ignore their own critical thinking in favor of group norms. The effect is more profound than simply going along with the crowd. Studies have shown that people will often alter their behaviors and beliefs to match those of the group, even when they know that the group's beliefs are wrong or harmful. It's the classic example of the bandwagon effect, where the fear of being ostracized is greater than the desire to be right. This is why people continue to participate in harmful or unethical behaviors when they see others doing the same. It's not because they're inherently bad, but because they lack the courage to stand alone. What's truly unsettling is that this behavior is subconscious. People don't actively decide to ignore their own reasoning. It's a reflex, an automatic response to the need for social belonging. And this conformity isn't limited to minor situations. It can extend to life-altering decisions, where the influence of a group overrides personal values. As we suppress independent thought, we forfeit our ability to critically assess situations and make choices that align with our true selves. Instead, we surrender to the comfort of collective belief, regardless of the consequences. Negative experiences are remembered more than positive ones. It's a disturbing truth that the human mind clings to pain, hurt, and disappointment far longer than it holds on to moments of joy or satisfaction. The negativity bias, a fundamental aspect of human psychology, ensures that negative experiences leave a much deeper and more lasting impact. Our brains are wired to prioritize these experiences because evolutionarily it helped our ancestors stay alert to danger and avoid harmful situations. If you're hurt or threatened, your brain remembers the details of that encounter to protect you from future harm. However, in modern life, this same instinct turns against us, often causing us to fixate on the painful or stressful moments, overshadowing the good ones. What makes this especially unsettling is that despite the many positive things we may experience, the negative moments tend to dominate our memory. One harsh criticism can erase 1,000 compliments. A single betrayal can undo years of trust. People replay failures, rehash arguments, and ruminate over slights long after they've passed. The emotional weight of negative experiences intensifies the memory, making it more vivid and easier to recall, while the positive moments fade into the background, forgotten or underappreciated. This imbalance creates an emotional landscape where we are more likely to focus on what went wrong than what went right. It can lead to feelings of dissatisfaction, anxiety, and depression. The impact of this bias is profound. People often don't realize that they are allowing one bad moment to distort their entire perception of reality. In doing so, they may lose sight of the happiness, success, and love that exist alongside the pain. The mind's tendency to hold on to negativity ultimately shapes our worldview, making it harder to appreciate the good and find peace in the present. Short-term pleasure often trumps long-term happiness. One of the most unsettling truths about human behavior is our tendency to prioritize immediate gratification over long-term fulfillment. Despite knowing that delayed rewards tend to lead to greater happiness and success, many people choose quick, fleeting pleasures instead, whether it's indulging in unhealthy food, spending money on unnecessary luxuries, or seeking temporary distractions like social media. These quick fixes provide an instant sense of satisfaction that masks deeper, unresolved needs. The problem lies in how easy it is to give in to these impulses. The momentary relief feels rewarding, and the promise of future happiness becomes a distant concern that can be easily pushed aside. This pattern stems from the way our brains are wired. Evolutionarily, humans were built to seek immediate rewards for survival. Finding food or shelter quickly could mean the difference between life and death. In today's world, however, this natural drive towards instant pleasure often works against us, as it steers us away from decisions that require effort and long-term vision. The emotional high we get from a quick pleasure, whether it's a sugary snack or an impulsive purchase, becomes addictive, making it harder to resist. What's even more disturbing is how this behavior sabotages long-term happiness. While short-term pleasures can bring momentary joy, they rarely lead to lasting contentment. In fact, the pursuit of these fleeting rewards often results in regret, unfulfilled desires, and even self-destructive patterns. The longer we chase these temporary highs, the further we drift from true satisfaction, setting ourselves up for a cycle of disappointment and disillusionment. Ultimately, the struggle between immediate pleasure and lasting happiness is one that shapes much of our lives, and we are often too blind to realize how much we're sacrificing for the sake of a few moments of indulgence. People are cruel when anonymous or unaccountable. When individuals are shielded from the consequences of their actions, they often reveal the darkest aspects of their character. The anonymity provided by the internet or the absence of direct accountability can lead to behavior that is disturbingly cruel. This phenomenon is known as the online disinhibition effect, where people behave in ways they would never consider in face-to-face interactions. The lack of immediate repercussions strips away the social norms that normally keep cruelty in check, allowing individuals to lash out without fear of being caught or punished. What's most chilling is how easily this cruelty can escalate. Without the personal responsibility of their words or actions, people often engage in harassment, bullying, or even spreading hateful ideologies. The mask of anonymity removes empathy, and without the humanizing presence of another person, cruelty becomes abstract, something that can be easily dismissed as just words or just a joke. But the truth is that these actions cause real harm. The victims may never know the identity of their aggressors, but the emotional damage can be profound and long-lasting. This detachment from accountability also occurs in physical spaces where the group dynamic or the lack of personal responsibility encourages malicious behavior. It's why people can commit acts of violence or injustice when they believe they won't be held accountable, whether in a mob or under the influence of authority. The disturbing reality is that many individuals, when free from consequences, lose their moral compass and act in ways that are far more destructive than they would in a more accountable environment. What this exposes is a frightening vulnerability in human nature. Without the checks of responsibility, people can become shockingly cruel. Many forgive but get hurt again. Forgiveness is often seen as an act of grace, a release from the chains of anger and resentment. It is supposed to heal and restore relationships. Yet, disturbingly, many people forgive only to be hurt again, falling into a cycle of repeated emotional pain. The unsettling reality is that forgiveness, while noble, doesn't guarantee that the person who caused harm has truly changed. Often, forgiveness is given in the hope that things will improve, that the hurt will be acknowledged and never repeated. But in many cases, those who have hurt us in the past continue to do so, taking advantage of our goodwill and vulnerability. What makes this even more painful is that those who forgive are not always acting out of weakness, but out of a genuine desire for peace and healing. They believe that by letting go of their resentment, they can break the cycle of bitterness. However, the painful truth is that some people never learn from their mistakes. They may apologize, promise change, and appear remorseful, but their actions don't align with their words. The result is that the same hurts resurface, and the forgiveness given only deepens the wound. This repeated cycle of forgiving and getting hurt again is not just emotionally exhausting, but can also erode self-esteem and trust. It's a reminder that love and kindness don't always protect us from betrayal, and that some people are incapable or unwilling to treat us with the respect we deserve. The hardest truth is that even when we forgive, we sometimes find ourselves back in the same painful place, caught in an endless loop of disappointment. Self-interest often outweighs concern for others. At the heart of human behavior lies a troubling truth. Self-interest often trumps empathy or concern for others. No matter how much we may profess to care about the well-being of others, when it comes down to it, our own needs, desires, and survival instincts frequently take precedence. This is a hard reality to accept, but it's deeply ingrained in us. We are biologically wired to prioritize our own safety and happiness, and this innate drive can make us act in ways that seem cold or selfish to those around us. The problem arises when this self-interest extends beyond just meeting basic needs. It influences our actions even when we're not in immediate danger. In situations where personal gain is on the line, whether it's in relationships, work, or societal interactions, people often choose what benefits them most, even at the expense of others. A person might betray a friend for career advancement or stay silent in the face of injustice to avoid personal discomfort. The urge to protect one's own interests, whether consciously or unconsciously, leads people to overlook the suffering of others or dismiss it as less important than their own aspirations. What's even more disturbing is that this behavior doesn't always manifest in extreme cases. It can be subtle, choosing convenience over kindness, taking credit for someone else's work, or avoiding helping someone in need because it inconveniences you. Over time, this constant prioritization of self-interest erodes empathy and creates a world where individual gains are often valued over the collective well-being. This truth highlights a deeper moral struggle, how much of our humanity remains when self-interest dominates our actions. People help more when they're being watched. The uncomfortable truth is that human beings are more likely to offer help when they know someone is observing them. This tendency, rooted in the concept of social validation, reveals how much of our actions are driven by the desire for approval rather than genuine kindness. The presence of an audience, whether in person or through the social scrutiny of a camera, motivates people to act in ways they believe will make them look good. It's not necessarily that they don't care about others, but rather that the desire to be perceived as compassionate often outweighs their impulse to help when no one is watching. The psychology behind this behavior is disturbing because it shows how performance-driven many of our actions are. In situations where no one is present to witness the act, people may be less inclined to step in and assist, even if they have the means to do so. The famous bystander effect highlights this phenomenon. People are less likely to help when they believe others are also witnessing the situation. It's as if the value of helping someone diminishes without the external validation. People may justify their inaction, thinking someone else will intervene, or simply feel less compelled when their altruism won't be seen or praised. What's deeply unsettling is how this desire for recognition can distort the purity of our intentions. Genuine empathy and selflessness should drive us to help others, but too often, the desire for social reward and approval clouds our better judgment. It's a reflection of how much we value perception over authenticity, where the real motive behind an action becomes less about the person in need and more about how we appear to others. The truth is, if we weren't being watched, many of us might not act at all. Fear of shame makes people avoid accountability. Shame is one of the most powerful emotions humans experience, and its grip can be paralyzing. The fear of feeling ashamed, of being judged or exposed, often leads people to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. This fear is so intense that many would rather shift blame, make excuses, or deny wrongdoing than face the discomfort of being accountable. The shame of admitting mistakes or failures feels like a threat to one's social standing, self-worth, and identity. So, instead of confronting the truth, many hide behind lies, distractions, or even outright denial, hoping that the situation will resolve itself without them having to take ownership. What makes this fear so disturbing is its ability to prevent growth. Avoiding accountability doesn't just mean avoiding the pain of shame, it means avoiding the opportunity to learn, change, and improve. When we refuse to own up to our mistakes, we reinforce harmful behaviors, perpetuating a cycle of dishonesty and avoidance. The emotional cost is high. Shame often leads to self-loathing, anxiety, and a persistent fear of being exposed, further compounding the inability to face the truth. This avoidance also poisons relationships. When people consistently fail to take responsibility for their actions, it erodes trust. Those around them begin to feel that they cannot rely on them, or that the truth will always be distorted to protect their image. The unsettling reality is that for many, the fear of shame trumps the desire for integrity. Instead of confronting the pain of accountability, they choose to live in the false comfort of denial, sacrificing authenticity and connection for the sake of avoiding discomfort. Bias is common, even if unnoticed. Biases are woven into the fabric of human existence, often lurking in the background of our decisions, interactions, and perceptions. What makes this truth so unsettling is that these biases often operate unnoticed, shaping how we view the world and the people around us without us even realizing it. Whether it's racial, gender, or cognitive bias, these deeply ingrained prejudices influence our behavior in ways we rarely acknowledge. Our brains are wired to categorize and make judgments based on past experiences, societal influences, and unconscious associations. This helps us navigate a complex world quickly, but it also leads us to form conclusions that are based on stereotypes or skewed perspectives. What's especially disturbing is that many people pride themselves on being open-minded and fair, yet still harbor biases that they are unaware of. These biases can manifest in subtle ways, choosing one candidate over another based on unconscious preferences, or dismissing someone's opinion because of their appearance or background. The truth is that everyone is biased to some degree, regardless of how much they try to be objective or fair. It's not always malicious, it's simply the way the brain operates, trying to make sense of an overwhelmingly complex world. The most disturbing part is that these biases can lead to unfair treatment, discrimination, and inequality, all while the individuals involved remain blissfully unaware of their impact. This makes confronting our biases so difficult because unless we actively seek to recognize and challenge them, they remain hidden, silently influencing our behavior and perpetuating harm. The reality is that bias, even when unnoticed, shapes how we treat others and, ultimately, how we experience the world around us. Betrayal happens for personal gain. Betrayal is one of the most painful and jarring experiences a person can endure, yet it's disturbingly common, often driven by a desire for personal gain. People betray others not always because of hatred or malice, but because the rewards of doing so outweigh their sense of loyalty or ethics. This truth speaks to a dark corner of human nature, where self-interest and ambition can lead someone to betray even those they care about. Whether it's a friend selling out another for a job opportunity, a partner cheating to satisfy desires, or a colleague undermining someone for career advancement, betrayal is frequently motivated by the pursuit of something that benefits the betrayer. What's truly unsettling is how easily people justify betrayal to themselves. The mind convinces itself that the ends justify the means, that the personal gain earned from betraying someone is worth the cost of trust and the damage to relationships. This rationalization often happens subconsciously, as the person tells themselves it's just business or necessary for success, as if the other person's pain is an unfortunate but acceptable side effect. The worst part is that betrayal often comes from those closest to us, the people we expect to have our backs. Friends, family, and lovers can all turn against us when the temptation of personal gain becomes too great. Betrayal leaves scars that are not easily healed. It creates a deep emotional wound that not only shatters trust, but can also leave the victim questioning their worth. The truth behind betrayal is that it is a calculated decision made in pursuit of something more personal, often at the expense of another's heartache. And in that cold calculation, the most troubling reality surfaces. The pursuit of self-interest can easily overshadow any sense of loyalty or integrity. Decisions are often made emotionally, not logically. One of the most unsettling aspects of human behavior is how rarely our decisions are based on rational thought. Instead, they are driven by emotions, fear, desire, anger, pride, often overriding logic and reason. The truth is that the brain processes emotions faster than it processes logical thought, making emotional reactions more immediate and influential in decision-making. Even when we think we're being objective, emotions subtly guide us toward choices that feel right in the moment but may not serve our long-term interests. It's a disturbing realization that so much of what we do is shaped by how we feel rather than by clear, logical reasoning. This emotional decision-making can be seen in almost every aspect of life. We impulsively purchase things we don't need because they trigger feelings of joy or excitement. We stay in unhealthy relationships because we fear loneliness more than we value our well-being. We make snap judgments about people based on initial feelings, allowing bias to cloud our judgment. Even in high-stakes situations like career moves or financial choices, the emotions we experience, whether it's the fear of failure or the excitement of success, can push us to make irrational decisions that defy logic. What's even more disturbing is that people often fail to recognize how much emotion influences their choices. It's easy to convince ourselves that we are being logical, especially when we justify emotional decisions with reasoning that fits our desired outcome. The emotional impulse becomes the hidden driver, with logic playing catch-up. This emotional bias leaves us vulnerable to making decisions that, in hindsight, often feel like mistakes, decisions that were made not with clarity, but with the emotional chaos of the moment. Prejudice against differences is natural. At the core of human behavior lies a deeply unsettling truth. Prejudice against differences is instinctive. This natural bias is rooted in our evolutionary need to identify and protect ourselves from perceived threats. From early human history, survival often depended on recognizing us versus them, the familiar and the unfamiliar. Those who were part of our tribe were safe, while those outside it were seen as potential threats. This instinctive categorization, though once necessary for survival, now manifests in subtle yet harmful ways. The disturbing reality is that this bias operates below our conscious awareness. People tend to feel more comfortable with those who resemble themselves, whether it's in terms of race, culture, religion, or even behavior. Differences trigger unease, and this discomfort often gives rise to stereotyping, discrimination, and exclusion. We may tell ourselves that we value diversity and inclusivity, but the truth is, the brain continues to instinctively gravitate towards similarity. Even the most well-meaning individuals can harbor unconscious prejudices, making it incredibly difficult to break free from this ingrained pattern. What's even more disconcerting is the way society often reinforces this bias. Media, culture, and history have continually divided people into in-groups and out-groups, perpetuating stereotypes that fuel prejudice. This natural inclination to favor what's familiar leads to a fractured society where people of different backgrounds or perspectives are often marginalized or misunderstood. The most troubling aspect is that without conscious effort, this instinctual bias remains a silent force, shaping our interactions and decisions in ways we may never fully recognize or confront. The result is a world divided by unseen barriers, where differences are feared instead of embraced, People avoid standing up against injustice unless it's personal. It's a deeply uncomfortable truth that, in the face of injustice, most people will remain passive unless it directly affects them. The idea of standing up for what's right, of challenging power, or confronting wrongdoing often seems noble, yet the reality is that when it's not personal, the desire to get involved is frequently overshadowed by fear, indifference, or the comfort of inaction. The collective apathy toward injustice becomes even more disturbing when we realize that despite our moral beliefs and convictions, we often turn a blind eye to the suffering of others. Whether it's witnessing discrimination, unfair treatment, or corruption, people tend to avoid intervening unless they are directly impacted by the situation. This reluctance to act stems from a complex mix of factors: fear of backlash, a sense of helplessness, or the simple discomfort of confronting something that feels too big or too dangerous to challenge. The truth is that when we are unaffected by the injustice, there's a tendency to rationalize inaction. We tell ourselves it's not our problem, that someone else will handle it, or that we don't have the power to make a difference. It's easier to stay silent, to maintain our personal comfort, than to risk standing up for what is right. What's especially disturbing is that this complacency contributes to the perpetuation of injustice. The more people remain passive, the more injustice thrives, often unnoticed or unchallenged. It's a harsh reminder that when we don't personally feel the sting of wrongdoing, we are more likely to ignore it. This silence creates a world where, for many, standing up for justice is a matter of personal stakes, not universal morality. And in the end, the cycle of injustice continues, fueled by our unwillingness to act unless we are personally touched by it. Bad behavior is often rationalized. One of the most unsettling truths about human nature is how easily we justify our own bad behavior. When we hurt someone, make a morally questionable decision, or act in ways we know are wrong, our minds often go into overdrive, crafting rationalizations to make the actions feel acceptable. The brain does this as a defense mechanism, protecting our self-image and preventing feelings of guilt or shame. Instead of facing the uncomfortable truth that we've done something harmful, we create reasons, however flimsy, to excuse ourselves. It's as if our actions can be justified by any number of excuses. They deserved it, it was for the greater good, or I had no choice. What makes this truth so disturbing is the ease with which people convince themselves that their bad behavior is somehow justified. It's not always about malice. Often, it's about survival or self-preservation. A person may lie to protect their reputation, cheat to avoid failure, or betray someone for personal gain, all while rationalizing it as a necessary step. These justifications aren't always conscious either. Sometimes they are so deeply ingrained that they feel completely natural, making the person unaware of the moral compromise they've made. This rationalization process creates a dangerous cycle where bad behavior becomes normalized. When we rationalize our wrongdoings, we not only undermine our own moral compass, but also enable the same behavior in others. Over time, it erodes our capacity for genuine self-reflection and accountability, leaving us trapped in a world where right and wrong are blurred by self-serving justifications. It's an uncomfortable reminder that we can all be guilty of ignoring the truth in favor of making ourselves feel better. Fear of judgment leads to inauthenticity. The fear of judgment is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior, and it often drives us to act in ways that feel unnatural or inauthentic. At its core, this fear is a survival mechanism. Humans are social creatures, and the need for acceptance is hardwired into us. However, in today's world, that instinct to conform and be accepted often forces us to hide our true selves. Whether it's adjusting our opinions to fit in with a group, pretending to be happy when we're not, or putting on a facade to appear more successful, The fear of how others will perceive us leads to a constant internal struggle between who we really are and who we feel we need to be. What makes this especially disturbing is that this fear is so ingrained in us that we may not even realize how much it controls our actions. We become trapped in a cycle of people-pleasing where the opinions of others dictate our behavior. We hide parts of our personalities or emotions out of fear of being judged as weak, flawed, or unworthy. The more we suppress our authentic selves, the more disconnected we become from who we truly are. The result is a hollow version of ourselves that is shaped by external expectations rather than internal truths. Even worse, this inauthenticity breeds anxiety and dissatisfaction. The longer we pretend to be something we're not, the harder it becomes to differentiate between our true desires and the persona we've created. The fear of judgment leaves us isolated, never truly connecting with others on a meaningful level. Instead of living in alignment with our values, we live in constant fear of not measuring up, perpetuating a cycle of self-doubt and emotional disconnection. Ultimately, we sacrifice our authenticity for the fleeting comfort of fitting in. Fear motivates more than desire for success. It's an unsettling truth that fear often drives human behavior far more powerfully than the pursuit of success. While success is desirable, it's the fear of failure, rejection, or loss that often pushes people to act. Fear is primal, deeply rooted in our survival instincts, and it triggers the body's fight or flight response, forcing us to take action in order to avoid perceived threats. Whether it's fear of not meeting expectations, losing a job, or being judged, the anxiety surrounding potential failure tends to be far more compelling than the abstract, often distant, notion of success. What makes this truth so disturbing is how it shapes behavior in negative ways. Fear often leads to shortcuts, self-sabotage, or unhealthy coping mechanisms. People are so consumed with avoiding failure that they abandon their authentic desires, settling for safer paths or giving up altogether. The drive for success becomes overshadowed by a relentless need to protect oneself from fear's suffocating grip. This can manifest in procrastination, perfectionism, or indecision, where the fear of not achieving perfection becomes paralyzing, preventing any progress at all. Even more troubling is the fact that fear of failure can often lead to a cycle of self-doubt, where every attempt is measured against the possibility of defeat rather than the potential for growth. This constant fear can diminish the joy of achievement, turning success into a mere escape from failure rather than something fulfilling. Ultimately, fear doesn't just hold us back. It actively shapes our choices, often leading to lives driven more by avoidance than by the pursuit of true fulfillment or achievement. True empathy is rare. In a world where we are constantly encouraged to connect with others, it's a sobering truth that true empathy is a rare commodity. Most people can sympathize with others to some degree. They can express pity or offer support when they see someone suffering. But empathy, in its purest form, goes much deeper than that. True empathy involves not just understanding someone's pain, but genuinely feeling it as if it were your own. It's the ability to step into another person's shoes, to feel their emotional experience without judgment or detachment. This kind of deep emotional resonance is far less common than we like to believe. What makes this truth especially unsettling is how often people mistake sympathy for empathy. Sympathy allows us to keep a safe distance from others' suffering, to acknowledge their pain without becoming personally affected by it. Empathy, on the other hand, requires vulnerability, a willingness to open ourselves to the emotional experience of another person, even if it's uncomfortable. It requires us to let go of our own emotional defenses and truly connect. Unfortunately, most people are more focused on their own lives, their own struggles, and their own needs, leaving little space to fully understand or engage with the emotional worlds of others. This lack of true empathy leads to a world where people are often isolated in their pain, unable to find the deep understanding they crave. It's not that people don't care, but that they are often unwilling or unable to truly experience the world from someone else's perspective. The absence of true empathy creates a disconnect, making it harder to heal wounds, resolve conflicts, or build genuine relationships. In the end, this emotional distance leaves us isolated, each person locked in their own bubble, yearning for connection but rarely finding it. Favoritism clouds judgment of others' wrongs. One of the most troubling truths about human nature is how favoritism distorts our ability to see the wrongs of those we favor. When we have a personal connection to someone, whether it's a friend, family member, or colleague, our judgment becomes clouded. Even when that person makes mistakes, behaves unethically, or hurts others, we find ourselves overlooking or minimizing their actions. It's not that we don't know what they've done is wrong, but our attachment to them creates a biased lens through which we view their behavior. We excuse their actions, telling ourselves that they didn't mean it or that the circumstances were too overwhelming. We may even shift blame onto others to protect them. This favoritism can be especially dangerous because it allows toxic behaviors to persist. The more we make excuses for the people we care about, the less likely we are to hold them accountable. It's a subconscious effort to maintain the bond or protect the image we've built around them. However, this denial of their wrongs often harms others, and it creates a toxic environment where fairness and justice are compromised. What's truly disturbing is that favoritism isn't limited to those we are emotionally close to. It can extend to groups, teams, or even entire communities. When people are placed on pedestals, their flaws and faults are often ignored, or worse, excused, simply because they belong to the group we identify with. This selective blindness not only perpetuates harmful behaviors, but also undermines the integrity of our moral compass. We begin to prioritize loyalty over honesty, and the line between right and wrong becomes increasingly blurred. Social status often overrides personal values. It's a deeply troubling reality that many people will sacrifice their core beliefs and values in the pursuit of social status. The desire for recognition, admiration, and power can be so overwhelming that individuals compromise their integrity just to climb the social ladder or maintain a certain image. Social status, whether it's wealth, fame, or influence, becomes the primary motivator, pushing people to prioritize appearances over authenticity. This can be seen in everything from choosing career paths based on prestige rather than passion, to bending moral boundaries to please powerful people or gain favor in influential circles. What makes this particularly disturbing is how easily personal values are discarded when the promise of higher social standing is at stake. People will turn a blind eye to injustice, overlook ethical concerns, or act in ways that directly contradict their own principles, all for the sake of fitting in or advancing in society. In some cases, the pursuit of social status becomes so consuming that it distorts one's sense of self, replacing genuine desires with the shallow goal of external validation. It's not just about acquiring wealth or fame, it's about the social recognition that comes with it, and the belief that without it, they are less than others. The emotional toll of this behavior is severe. By choosing status over values, individuals lose their true selves and find themselves trapped in a cycle of superficiality. The more they abandon their personal beliefs for social gain, the more disconnected they become from who they really are. In the end, this prioritization of social standing over personal integrity doesn't lead to true fulfillment, but rather to a life filled with emptiness, constantly chasing external approval at the cost of internal peace. Actions contradict stated beliefs and values. It's a disturbing reality that, despite our best intentions, our actions often don't align with our stated beliefs and values. People frequently profess values like honesty, compassion, or integrity, yet their behaviors tell a different story. We may tell ourselves we believe in fairness, yet still engage in prejudiced behavior. We might claim to care about the environment, but continue to consume mindlessly or ignore sustainability. This inconsistency between what we say and what we do is more common than most would like to admit, and it reveals an unsettling truth about the complexity of human nature. What makes this contradiction so troubling is that, more often than not, it's unconscious. People rarely set out to act in ways that contradict their stated beliefs. However, subconscious desires, social pressures, and emotional impulses can override rational thinking, leading individuals to behave in ways that conflict with their values. The fear of being judged, the desire for acceptance, or even the pursuit of instant gratification can lead to decisions that don't align with a person's deeper convictions. This dissonance creates internal tension and erodes self-trust. When our actions consistently contradict our beliefs, we lose faith in our own integrity, leading to feelings of guilt, shame, and confusion. Even worse, it damages our relationships with others. When people observe that our actions don't match our words, they begin to question our authenticity, and trust, the foundation of any relationship, breaks down. The truth is, these contradictions are not just uncomfortable, they are a silent force that undermines personal growth, self-respect, and meaningful connections with others. The brain prioritizes the last thing seen or heard. One of the most unsettling truths about how our minds work is that we tend to give more weight to the most recent information we encounter, often at the expense of everything that came before. This phenomenon, known as the recency effect, means that the last thing we hear or see will be the thing that sticks with us the longest. In a world filled with constant stimuli, this means that our perceptions of people, situations, or events are often distorted by the most recent interactions or experiences, regardless of their importance or accuracy. This is especially troubling in high-stakes situations such as negotiations, relationships, or even elections, where the final impression often carries more emotional weight than the full context. Imagine a heated conversation where everything is going well, but then a single sharp remark or a moment of tension occurs at the end. That last moment can overshadow all the positive or neutral exchanges that preceded it. Our minds naturally hold on to that final experience, making it the one that shapes our judgment. In relationships, this means that a sudden outburst or a hurtful comment at the end of a conversation can lead to lasting resentment, even if everything before it was positive. What's particularly disturbing is how easily this bias can be manipulated. Advertisers, politicians, and even manipulative individuals know this well. By controlling the last impression, they can control how others perceive them. The brain's tendency to prioritize the most recent stimulus makes us vulnerable to manipulation, as it's often the last thing that influences our feelings and decisions, leaving us with a skewed view of reality. People shift blame to avoid responsibility. One of the darkest aspects of human behavior is how often people will shift blame to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. It's a reflexive act, an emotional escape route that allows individuals to sidestep guilt, shame, and the consequences of their mistakes. When something goes wrong, instead of owning up to it, the instinct is to point fingers, find someone else to blame, or fabricate a situation where responsibility falls on others. This is not merely a rare occurrence. It's a common tactic used by both individuals and organizations alike to protect their own interests. The act of shifting blame is not just about self-preservation, it's about maintaining a sense of control. People fear the repercussions of admitting fault, whether it's losing respect, facing punishment, or feeling like a failure. So, they deflect, often without fully considering the emotional or practical damage caused by their actions. In relationships, this means a partner might blame the other for a fight they started, or in the workplace, a leader may shift blame onto an employee to cover up their own mistakes. By deflecting responsibility, they escape the immediate discomfort of accountability, but at the cost of honesty and trust. What makes this so unsettling is how deeply ingrained it is in human nature. The need to protect oneself often trumps the need to be truthful, making it easier to lie, deny, or deceive. The more often blame is shifted, the more damaging it becomes to personal integrity and relationships. Over time, the habit of avoiding responsibility erodes one's sense of accountability, creating a toxic environment where no one is willing to own their actions and trust is shattered. Money often trumps ethics. One of the most unsettling truths about human behavior is the extent to which money can overshadow basic ethical considerations. In a world where wealth is often equated with success and power, many people will compromise their morals and principles to secure financial gain. Whether it's turning a blind eye to unethical practices, making dishonest business deals, or exploiting others for personal profit, the lure of money often blinds people to the consequences of their actions. The temptation to achieve financial success or maintain a certain lifestyle can be so overwhelming that it leads individuals to make choices that conflict with their core values. What makes this truth particularly disturbing is that in many cases, the compromises made for money aren't even seen as immoral by those involved. People justify their actions with rationalizations, convincing themselves that the end justifies the means, or that everyone else is doing it, so why shouldn't they? The pursuit of money becomes a justification for unethical behavior, eroding personal integrity and making it harder to discern right from wrong. It's a slippery slope where small ethical compromises gradually build up, and what once seemed like a clear line between right and wrong becomes blurred by the pressure to succeed financially. This behavior not only damages the individual's sense of self, but also contributes to a broader culture of greed and exploitation. The more society values money over ethics, the more people are conditioned to prioritize financial gain at all costs. Ultimately, this pursuit of wealth at the expense of morality leaves a hollow victory, one that may fill the bank account but empties the soul, leaving people to question what they truly sacrificed in the name of success. Fear of loneliness is deep-rooted. The fear of being alone runs deeper than most realize, and it's one of the most primal fears embedded in human nature. From the moment we are born, we are wired to seek connection, to belong, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. For early humans, survival depended on the group. Isolation meant vulnerability, and the threat of being cast out was a direct threat to one's very survival. This deeply ingrained fear persists to this day, shaping our behaviors in unsettling ways. What makes this fear so disturbing is how it subtly governs our choices. People often stay in toxic relationships, tolerate unhealthy situations, or sacrifice their values just to avoid the pain of loneliness. Even those who claim to cherish solitude can find themselves yearning for connection during times of emotional strain. The fear of loneliness can make people settle for superficial connections that don't nurture or fulfill them, yet they remain in these relationships simply to stave off the emptiness of being alone. It's as if the idea of being alone is so unbearable that they'll endure anything, discomfort, manipulation, or emotional neglect, just to avoid it. This fear also leads to unhealthy dependency on others for validation and happiness. People may become trapped in cycles of insecurity, constantly seeking approval or companionship to fill the void. The truth is that the fear of loneliness can cause people to lose themselves in the pursuit of connection, to the point where their own identity becomes secondary. It's not just about being alone, it's the overwhelming dread that being alone means being invisible, irrelevant, or unloved. This fear shapes lives in profound ways, often leading to choices driven more by the need for connection than by what is genuinely healthy or fulfilling. Overestimating one's intelligence is common. One of the most uncomfortable truths about human behavior is that most people overestimate their own intelligence. This phenomenon is so widespread that it has become almost a default way of thinking for many. Whether it's in professional settings, social interactions, or personal reflection, people tend to believe that they are smarter, more capable, or more insightful than they actually are. This cognitive bias, known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, occurs because individuals who lack expertise in a subject often lack the awareness to recognize their own limitations. The less someone knows about something, the more confident they become in their perceived knowledge. What's deeply unsettling is how this overconfidence can shape decisions and behaviors. Overestimating one's intelligence leads people to make poor choices, assuming they can handle situations that are beyond their skill level. It can also foster arrogance, as individuals believe their opinions are more valuable than those of others, often disregarding expert advice or alternative perspectives. In conversations, this can result in individuals dominating discussions with their exaggerated self-assurance, leaving no room for genuine exchange or learning. Even more disturbing is that this overestimation can prevent growth and self-improvement. If we believe we already know everything, we stop seeking out new knowledge, becoming trapped in our own limited understanding. This belief in our own intellectual superiority can isolate us from valuable feedback, making us less likely to recognize our mistakes or learn from them. Ultimately, this overconfidence becomes a barrier to both personal development and meaningful relationships, as it fosters a false sense of competence that distances us from reality. Comfort is prioritized over helping others. One of the most unsettling truths about human behavior is how often people prioritize their own comfort over the needs of others. In a world filled with suffering, injustice, and need, it's easy to pretend that the problems of others don't exist, especially when addressing them would require us to step outside our own bubble of comfort. It's a natural tendency to avoid situations that are inconvenient or emotionally taxing, and unfortunately, this often means turning a blind eye to the suffering of those around us. Whether it's ignoring a friend in distress because offering support would require effort, or staying silent in the face of injustice because speaking out could cause discomfort, many choose the path of least resistance. What makes this truth so disturbing is how easy it is for people to justify their inaction. The discomfort of getting involved, whether emotionally, physically, or financially, feels more pressing than the need to help someone else. This prioritization of self over others creates a cycle of apathy, where the weight of another person's pain is never enough to outweigh our own desire for ease. It's not that people are inherently cruel, it's that the fear of stepping out of their comfort zone often wins out. In some cases, people even convince themselves that they don't have the time or energy to help, while in reality, the real reason is the emotional cost of engaging with someone else's suffering. This behavior may seem harmless at first, but over time, it erodes the fabric of human connection. It fosters a world where self-interest and avoidance of discomfort create an emotional distance from others. The disturbing reality is that by continually prioritizing comfort, people unintentionally build walls around themselves, becoming numb to the very real struggles of those who need help. Authority figures can persuade people to commit wrongs. One of the most chilling truths about human nature is how easily people can be manipulated by authority figures to act against their own morals and better judgment. When someone in a position of power, whether a boss, teacher, or government official, gives instructions, many individuals will blindly follow, even when the actions they're being asked to take are unethical, harmful, or outright wrong. This phenomenon, famously demonstrated in the Milgram experiment, shows that ordinary people, when placed under the influence of authority, are often willing to cause harm to others, simply because they've been told to do so. What's deeply unsettling is how quickly this obedience can override personal conscience. People by nature seek to avoid conflict and gain approval from those in charge, so they defer to authority, even when it contradicts their values. The fear of punishment, coupled with the illusion of responsibility being shifted to the figure of authority, creates an environment where moral clarity becomes secondary to obedience. Even the most decent, well-intentioned individuals can be swayed into actions they would normally never consider if the orders come from someone they trust or fear. This blind obedience isn't just seen in extreme cases like the atrocities of war or corporate corruption. It happens daily in smaller ways. In workplaces, schools, and even friendships, authority figures can manipulate situations to make others comply with behaviors they would otherwise reject. It's a reminder of how vulnerable we are to the influence of power and how easily our own ethical compass can be lost when someone else holds the reins. The chilling reality is that we are all susceptible to losing ourselves in the presence of authority, sometimes with devastating consequences. Loyalty to groups often exceeds ethics. There's a disturbing truth about human behavior. Loyalty to a group can sometimes override basic ethical principles, from the family to political affiliations to organizations and even sports teams. People often prioritize their allegiance to a group over their moral compass. This loyalty, rooted in a deep need for belonging and connection, can lead individuals to overlook or even justify harmful actions if they are committed by their group. Whether it's defending the wrongdoings of a friend or blindly supporting a cause, the desire to stay loyal can overpower the instinct to do what's right. What makes this dynamic so chilling is the way it distorts our sense of right and wrong. When people feel connected to a group, they often become desensitized to the wrongdoings that group might engage in. Loyalty can blind them to injustice, allowing them to rationalize unethical behavior as justifiable or even necessary for the greater good of the group. This tribal mentality often overrides individual ethics, as maintaining harmony within the group becomes more important than standing up for what's morally right. This behavior is particularly dangerous in high-stakes situations, such as politics or corporate environments, where individuals might support harmful policies or cover up unethical actions just to preserve the unity of the group. It's a form of cognitive dissonance. People convince themselves that their loyalty is more important than the ethics they claim to hold. In the end, loyalty to a group can create an environment where wrongdoing is not only tolerated but actively supported, eroding the very foundation of ethical behavior. Favors are forgotten faster than wrongs. It's a harsh truth of human nature that people tend to remember the wrongs they experience far longer than the favors they are given. Despite the kindness, the support, or the sacrifices made for others, these positive actions often fade into the background, overshadowed by a single act of betrayal, criticism, or disappointment. The human mind has a natural tendency to fixate on negative experiences. It's as if the emotional weight of a wrong leaves a permanent scar, while acts of goodwill are brushed aside as mere expectations or obligations. This imbalance creates an unsettling dynamic where the person who goes out of their way to help or support is often taken for granted, their efforts slipping into obscurity while the smallest misstep is remembered and amplified. What makes this even more troubling is the way it distorts relationships. Individuals may pour time, energy, and care into others, but when they make a mistake, whether intentional or not, that is the moment that lingers in the minds of those they've helped. The wrong becomes the defining memory, even if it was an isolated incident. The favors, the love, the sacrifices, everything that came before are overshadowed by the hurt caused in a single moment. This dynamic erodes trust and fosters resentment. It's a reminder that no matter how much we give, it can often feel like it's never enough, especially when the wrongs are held in higher regard. The result is a world where kindness becomes an afterthought and mistakes become monumental, perpetuating a cycle of emotional imbalance that affects how we interact with each other. Technology hides real emotions. In today's digital age, technology has become a veil that masks our true emotions and creates a false sense of connection. The convenience of texting, social media, and video calls allows us to communicate without the raw vulnerability of face-to-face interactions. Behind a screen, it's easy to control how we are perceived, editing, filtering, and crafting messages that present a version of ourselves we want others to see. We can choose our words carefully, hide our true feelings, and avoid the discomfort of seeing someone's reaction. What's disturbing is how this filtered, curated communication has become the norm, making it increasingly difficult to connect with others on a genuine, emotional level. People can hide behind the anonymity of a screen, presenting a persona that may be far removed from their real selves. It's easy to say things you don't mean or to project confidence when in reality, your struggling. Social media, in particular, exacerbates this disconnect with its perfect, idealized images that bear little resemblance to the messy, complex truth of human experience. In a world where everyone seems to have a perfect life, the pressure to conform can be suffocating, leaving real emotions buried under layers of digital facades. What's even more unsettling is how this technology-driven communication limits emotional depth. In a face-to-face conversation, you can read someone's body language, hear the tone in their voice, and sense the subtleties of their emotions. Online, those signals are lost, and the result is a shallow, disconnected interaction. Over time, this detachment from raw, real emotions creates a world where people feel lonelier than ever, even though they are more connected than ever. The truth is, technology has made it easier than ever to hide from each other and from ourselves. Honesty isn't as valued as it seems. At first glance, honesty appears to be a universally praised virtue, a cornerstone of trust and integrity in relationships and society. However, the truth is far more uncomfortable. Honesty is often not as valued as we claim it to be. In reality, many people prefer a comforting lie over a harsh truth, especially when the truth might cause discomfort, conflict, or inconvenience. This paradox is unsettling because it shows how deep-seated our need for social harmony and self-preservation really is. While we tell ourselves that honesty is paramount, we regularly bend the truth to avoid confrontation, to protect our own interests, or simply to make life easier. What's more disturbing is that this willingness to lie or withhold the truth isn't always done with malicious intent. Many people lie to protect others' feelings, to maintain social peace, or even to avoid the fallout of difficult conversations. These white lies are so ingrained in daily life that they are often seen as harmless or even necessary. However, the cumulative effect of these small, seemingly benign lies can be more damaging than we realize. The more we prioritize the comfort of others over the truth, the more we erode genuine connection and mutual trust. Even in situations where honesty could lead to positive outcomes, people often shy away from it because of the potential consequences. The disturbing truth is that honesty, despite its high moral standing, often takes a backseat to personal convenience, fear of judgment, and the desire to maintain peace. We deceive others and, more disturbingly, deceive ourselves into thinking that the truth isn't always worth the trouble. In the end, the value we place on honesty is often conditional, only as valuable as the comfort it brings, not the truth it upholds. Fear of the unknown leads to destruction. The fear of the unknown is one of the most powerful and often destructive forces in human behavior. It's deeply ingrained in our psyche, rooted in our evolutionary history, when unfamiliarity often meant danger. In modern times, this fear manifests as an intense aversion to change, the unfamiliar, or anything that challenges the status quo. When faced with uncertainty, people instinctively react by resisting or attempting to control what they don't understand, and in doing so, they often end up causing harm. What makes this fear so dangerous is that it leads to actions driven by irrationality and defensiveness. Instead of seeking knowledge, embracing new ideas, or adapting to change, people often reject or destroy what they perceive as unknown or threatening. This can manifest in a refusal to embrace technological advancements, closed-mindedness toward new cultures or ideas, or the demonization of anyone or anything different from what is familiar. The fear of the unknown makes people cling to outdated ways of thinking, causing stagnation and, in some cases, even violent reactions against progress. Even more unsettling is the way this fear can shape entire societies or systems. History is filled with examples where the fear of change, whether it's technological, cultural, or political, has led to violence, discrimination, and widespread destruction. Fear of the unknown breeds paranoia, and that paranoia can justify harmful actions, whether it's persecuting others or dismantling progress out of fear of what might come next. The irony is that in trying to protect themselves from the unknown, people often end up causing the very harm they sought to avoid. The fear itself becomes the destroyer, not the unknown. Trust is often mistaken for familiarity. One of the most troubling realities of human relationships is how easily familiarity is mistaken for trust. Just because we know someone or interact with them frequently doesn't mean we truly trust them. Yet, many people confuse the two, assuming that familiarity automatically breeds reliability and honesty. This can be particularly dangerous because it creates a false sense of security. We may feel comfortable with someone we see every day, whether a colleague, a friend, or a family member, and believe that this comfort is proof of trust. But the truth is, familiarity alone doesn't guarantee that someone has our best interests at heart. What's even more unsettling is that this confusion can lead to vulnerability. When we mistake familiarity for trust, we may lower our guard and reveal personal details or make ourselves emotionally available to people who are not worthy of that openness. It's easy to assume that someone we know well, someone who's part of our routine, will always have our back. But familiarity doesn't inherently mean that they will act with integrity or care for us in the way true trust demands. The person who seems closest to you might not be someone you can rely on when it truly matters. This misunderstanding creates an emotional trap. We put our faith in people who don't deserve it based on the simple fact that we've spent time with them or share common experiences. The pain of betrayal becomes even worse when the person we trusted was never truly trustworthy to begin with. In the end, we are left feeling naive with the painful realization that trust must be earned, not assumed, regardless of how familiar someone may seem. Fear of misunderstanding outweighs fear of being wrong. In human interactions, there is an unsettling truth. People often fear being misunderstood more than they fear actually being wrong. It's not the fear of making a mistake that drives us to avoid difficult conversations. It's the fear that our intentions or ideas will be misinterpreted. This fear of misunderstanding can prevent people from speaking their truth, voicing their opinions, or taking risks. The idea that someone might misjudge our character or intentions can feel like a greater threat than the simple act of being wrong. It's as if the shame of having others misunderstand us is more painful than the humiliation of being proven incorrect. What makes this fear so powerful is that it taps into our deep need for validation and acceptance. People crave understanding, and the thought that someone might not get them or misinterpret their words can lead to feelings of isolation or rejection. As a result, many avoid speaking up altogether, suppressing their ideas to maintain peace or to avoid confrontation. This fear can cause people to second-guess their every word, leading to hesitation and confusion in communication. What's truly disturbing is how this fear can stop people from learning and growing. If we are more concerned with protecting ourselves from misunderstanding than confronting our mistakes, we miss out on the opportunity for honest dialogue, correction, and improvement. It keeps us locked in a cycle of self-preservation, avoiding vulnerability and the chance to truly understand each other. The real danger lies in the silence that stems from this fear, silence that perpetuates misunderstanding and prevents genuine connection. Confirmation bias shapes beliefs. One of the most disturbing truths about human behavior is the powerful force of confirmation bias, the tendency to search for, interpret, and prioritize information that confirms what we already believe while dismissing or ignoring evidence that contradicts our views. This cognitive distortion shapes not only personal beliefs but also influences how we interact with the world. It's a force so subtle and pervasive that it often goes unnoticed, yet it profoundly alters our perceptions of reality. Whether it's politics, religion, or personal relationships, confirmation bias ensures that we live in echo chambers where our existing opinions are continually reinforced, leaving little room for objective truth or growth. What makes this particularly unsettling is that confirmation bias leads people to become more entrenched in their views, even when faced with facts that challenge their beliefs. Rather than engaging with conflicting perspectives, individuals often double down, seeking out sources that support their preconceptions. This behavior isn't always conscious. It's an automatic response that keeps us in our comfort zone, protecting us from cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort that arises when we encounter conflicting information. The desire to feel right and avoid discomfort can be so strong that it shuts down the willingness to learn or adapt. The emotional toll of this bias is profound. It breeds division as people become more polarized in their beliefs, unable or unwilling to see the nuances of opposing views. Confirmation bias doesn't just limit personal growth. It fuels misinformation, stifles empathy, and deepens societal rifts. In a world where truth and understanding are vital, confirmation bias is a silent enemy, shaping our beliefs and interactions in ways that prevent us from seeing the whole picture. The desire to be liked leads to compromising beliefs. At the core of human nature lies an unsettling truth. The desire to be liked often leads people to compromise their deeply held beliefs. The need for social acceptance is so powerful that it can make individuals bend, alter, or entirely abandon their values in order to fit in. Whether it's in personal relationships, at work, or within larger societal groups, the fear of being rejected or misunderstood drives people to suppress their true selves. They begin to prioritize others' approval over authenticity, often without realizing the cost to their integrity. What makes this truth so disturbing is how insidious it is. The desire for belonging can quietly chip away at a person's sense of self until they no longer recognize the values they once held dear. Small compromises, laughing at a joke you don't find funny, agreeing with an opinion you don't share, or hiding your true feelings to avoid conflict, slowly erode one's authenticity. Over time, these small concessions add up, and what once felt like harmless attempts to fit in can become a complete surrender of core beliefs. The emotional toll of this is profound. The more one suppresses their own truth, the more isolated they feel, even in the company of others. Paradoxically, while trying to gain the approval of those around them, people end up losing connection with themselves. The desire to be liked can push someone into a vicious cycle of self-doubt, where the approval of others becomes more important than personal fulfillment. The price of fitting in becomes the erosion of identity, leaving individuals disconnected, not only from their values but from their own sense of worth. Choosing ease over right is common. One of the most disheartening truths about human behavior is the tendency to choose what is easy over what is right. In moments of moral conflict, when faced with a difficult decision, many people will opt for the path of least resistance, even if it means compromising their values or doing something they know is wrong. This preference for comfort over integrity is deeply ingrained in human nature, often driven by a desire to avoid discomfort, confrontation, or the emotional strain that comes with making difficult choices. The simple truth is, it's easier to turn a blind eye to injustice, to let a small lie slip, or to go along with something we know is wrong, than to take the harder, more righteous path. This choice to prioritize ease over righteousness has far-reaching consequences. When we take shortcuts or avoid doing what's ethically right, we often feel a temporary sense of relief. However, that relief is short-lived, and over time, it erodes our moral compass. The more we choose convenience, the less likely we are to challenge ourselves or stand up for what we believe in. And as this pattern repeats, it becomes harder to recognize what we've lost: our integrity, our self-respect, and our ability to act with true moral conviction. What's especially unsettling is how easily people justify these choices. The rationalizations come quickly: it's not that big of a deal, or everyone else is doing it, or I'll deal with it later. But every time we choose ease over what's right, we diminish our ability to confront uncomfortable truths, allowing compromise and dishonesty to become a normal part of our behavior. Ultimately, this choice to avoid discomfort can leave us disconnected from our true selves, lost in a world where convenience trumps conscience. Equality values are often contradicted by biases. Despite the widespread belief in equality and fairness, the reality is that most people's actions and judgments are unconsciously shaped by deep-seated biases. These biases, whether racial, gender-based, or socio-economic, contradict the very principles of equality that people claim to uphold. It's easy to say that everyone deserves equal treatment, but in practice, those beliefs often unravel when faced with real-world decisions. Whether it's a hiring manager overlooking a qualified candidate because of their gender, or an individual subconsciously avoiding someone of a different race, bias frequently outweighs the ideal of fairness. What makes this contradiction so disturbing is how invisible these biases often are. People can genuinely believe in equality and yet, at the same time, unknowingly act in ways that perpetuate inequality. These biases are not always blatant or malicious. They can manifest in subtle ways, like favoring people who are similar to oneself or interpreting someone's actions differently based on preconceived stereotypes. The insidious nature of these biases lies in their ability to influence decisions and interactions without people even realizing it. The real danger of this disconnect is that it undermines the very fabric of fairness. When we claim to value equality, but our actions are guided by bias, we perpetuate systems of inequality even in spaces that claim to be progressive. This contradiction erodes trust, perpetuates discrimination, and ultimately leads to a society where, despite the rhetoric of fairness, true equality remains out of reach. It's a harsh reminder that good intentions are often not enough. If biases go unchecked, they undermine the very values we strive to uphold. Hatred can feel easier than love. The unsettling truth is that, at times, hatred can feel more instinctive and less complicated than love. While love demands vulnerability, patience, and empathy, hatred offers a quick emotional payoff. It's raw, powerful, and often more immediate. Hatred doesn't require understanding or compromise. It's a defense mechanism that shields us from pain, disappointment, or fear. When we're hurt, betrayed, or wronged, It's easy to slip into a mindset of anger and resentment because hatred gives us a sense of control over our emotions, making us feel stronger or more righteous. Unlike love, which requires effort and openness, hatred feels like a default, almost effortless response to hurt. What makes this even more disturbing is that once hatred takes root, it becomes easier to feed and sustain. The more we nurture negative feelings towards someone or something, the more they consume us, turning into a source of strength or justification. This isn't just seen in personal relationships, but on a larger societal scale, where collective hatred can be fueled by prejudice, misinformation, and fear. The intense, immediate emotional release that comes with hatred is far more seductive than the slow-building, vulnerable process of love, which often requires us to confront our own flaws and weaknesses. The tragedy is that while hatred may feel easier, it never leads to true peace or fulfillment. It isolates us, distorts our perceptions, and consumes our energy, leaving us disconnected from the very humanity that love could have connected us to hatred. In its ease, ultimately traps us in a cycle of bitterness, preventing us from experiencing the healing and growth that love brings. Emotional issues are often avoided. One of the most disturbing truths about human behavior is how frequently people avoid addressing their emotional issues. The discomfort of confronting deep-seated pain, grief, or unresolved trauma is so intense that many will go to great lengths to bury these feelings rather than face them. Whether it's distracting themselves with work, turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance use, or simply ignoring their emotional needs, the impulse to avoid difficult emotions is overwhelming. What's most troubling is that this avoidance doesn't make the emotional issues disappear. Instead, it festers beneath the surface, influencing behavior in ways people may not even realize. The emotional consequences of avoidance are profound. When emotional issues are left unaddressed, they create a constant undercurrent of anxiety, stress, or depression that can poison relationships and daily life. People may find themselves lashing out over small inconveniences or feeling disconnected from others, all because their unresolved emotions are bubbling up in unhealthy ways. This avoidance becomes a defense mechanism that ironically leads to greater emotional instability in the long run. Even more disturbing is how often people convince themselves that they are fine or moving on, masking their unresolved issues with a facade of normalcy. But the truth is that emotional avoidance keeps people from growing or healing. Instead of facing the pain and working through it, they trap themselves in a cycle of denial and repression. In the end, the emotional issues only grow more intense, taking a far greater toll than they would have if confronted head-on. The real cost is not just the emotional pain, but the missed opportunity for genuine self-understanding and emotional freedom. Denial of responsibility helps avoid blame. One of the darkest truths of human behavior is the tendency to deny responsibility when things go wrong, even when the fault is clear. The need to protect one's ego, avoid guilt, or escape blame leads people to distance themselves from their actions or decisions, even when it's obvious they played a role in the outcome. This denial can be subtle, shifting blame to others, minimizing one's own involvement, or even making excuses that distort reality. The instinct to avoid personal responsibility is deeply rooted in the human desire to preserve self-image and avoid the discomfort of being held accountable. What makes this behavior so disturbing is how pervasive and often unconscious it is. People rarely own up to their mistakes, and when they do, it's often a half-hearted attempt to save face rather than a genuine acknowledgement of wrong. This denial isn't always about deception. Sometimes it's a defense mechanism to protect against shame or fear of punishment. However, the more we deny responsibility, the harder it becomes to learn from our mistakes. This lack of accountability not only damages personal growth, but can also harm relationships, as others begin to see us as unreliable or dishonest. The emotional toll of this denial can also be severe. By refusing to take responsibility, we refuse to confront the discomfort of our actions, which can lead to a buildup of guilt, resentment, or internal conflict. This avoidance doesn't lead to peace. It leads to emotional fragmentation. Ultimately, the refusal to accept responsibility keeps us locked in a cycle of denial, preventing us from truly understanding our own behavior and making meaningful changes. Trusting authority without question is common. One of the most troubling truths about human behavior is how easily people trust authority figures without question. Whether it's a government leader, a boss at work, or a respected expert in a field, many individuals automatically assume that those in positions of power have the answers, the knowledge, or the moral compass to guide them. This blind trust is deeply ingrained in society, often rooted in the belief that authority figures are inherently more qualified or have a greater understanding than the general public. It's a natural human instinct to look for guidance and security from those who are in charge, but it's also dangerously naive. What makes this so disturbing is the power it gives to authority figures to manipulate and control. When people unquestioningly follow instructions or believe everything an authority figure says, it opens the door to manipulation and exploitation. History is full of examples where blind trust in leaders has led to devastating consequences, from political regimes that caused suffering to corporations that exploited workers. The chilling reality is that the more people defer to authority without scrutiny, the less likely they are to recognize harmful behavior or systemic flaws. The ease with which authority is accepted also creates an environment where critical thinking is suppressed. People are less likely to question what they're told, even when things don't feel right, because it feels safer to follow than to challenge. This passive trust ultimately strips away the ability to see the world clearly, reducing individuals to mere followers who lack the courage to question the very systems they rely on. In the end, trusting authority without question not only allows manipulation to flourish, but also stunts personal growth and accountability. Truth is often sacrificed for peace. One of the most unsettling truths about human behavior is how frequently we choose peace over truth. It's a coping mechanism driven by our desire to avoid conflict, discomfort, and emotional turmoil. When faced with harsh truths, many people will opt to remain silent, soften their words, or outright lie, all in the name of preserving harmony. Whether in personal relationships, workplaces, or even politics, the temptation to keep the peace often outweighs the willingness to confront difficult realities. The truth becomes something too painful or divisive to confront, so it's buried in favor of maintaining a facade of tranquility. What makes this choice so troubling is how it distorts relationships and stunts personal growth. When truth is sacrificed, people aren't able to resolve issues or heal from past wounds. Instead, resentment builds, misunderstandings linger, and the root of the problem remains hidden, festering under the surface. By avoiding confrontation, we ultimately prolong suffering, convincing ourselves that peace is the absence of conflict, when in reality, it's often the absence of resolution. The irony is that this avoidance of truth often undermines the very peace it seeks to preserve, because false peace creates a fragile, temporary calm that is easily shattered when the truth inevitably surfaces. In the pursuit of peace, we can lose sight of what really matters: honesty, trust, and authenticity. Sacrificing truth might offer a momentary escape from discomfort, but it leaves us living in a world of illusions, disconnected from the reality of our emotions and relationships. The cost of this false peace is high, and the longer we choose to ignore the truth, the harder it becomes to face it when it finally demands attention. Emotion overrides logic. One of the most unsettling truths about human behavior is that, more often than not, emotion outweighs logic in decision-making. In theory, humans pride themselves on their ability to think rationally, to assess situations based on facts and evidence. Yet, time and time again, emotions dictate our choices. Fear, anger, love, and even joy can cloud judgment, causing people to act impulsively, irrationally, or even destructively. Whether it's in a heated argument, an impulsive purchase, or a snap decision driven by fear of the unknown, emotion often takes the wheel, leaving reason behind. What makes this particularly disturbing is how quickly emotion can hijack the brain's logical processes. In moments of stress or high emotional intensity, the brain's logical center takes a backseat to the primal, instinctual parts of the mind. This is why people often say things they regret in the heat of anger, or make poor financial decisions when caught up in excitement. The truth is, our emotions don't just influence our decisions, they often overwhelm and distort our ability to think clearly. The problem deepens when emotions lead to long-term consequences. Unchecked emotional reactions can destroy relationships, careers, and personal well-being. When people act based on fear or anger, they may burn bridges, isolate themselves, or make choices that they would never make in a more measured state. The worst part is that after the emotional storm passes, logic often reveals the costly mistakes made in the heat of the moment. Emotion's power to override logic leaves people not only questioning their decisions, but trapped in cycles of regret and self-doubt. Altruism is often self-serving. At first glance, altruism seems like the purest form of human behavior, selflessly helping others without expecting anything in return. But the disturbing truth is that much of what we perceive as altruistic behavior is often motivated by self-interest. People tend to give, sacrifice, or act kindly, not solely out of genuine concern for others, but because it brings them personal benefits. These benefits might be social approval, a boost in self-esteem, or the warm, feel-good satisfaction of doing something good. In some cases, altruism serves as a tool to build one's own reputation or to gain favor, whether in the eyes of others or as a way to feel morally superior. What makes this truth so unsettling is how easily it's hidden behind a veil of righteousness. Many people are unaware of the underlying motives driving their so-called altruism. They may genuinely believe they are acting for the benefit of others, but deep down, the act of helping serves their own emotional or psychological needs. For example, a person might volunteer at a charity, not out of a pure desire to help those in need, but because doing so enhances their social standing or provides a sense of purpose. In extreme cases, individuals may manipulate situations to appear altruistic in order to gain power or control over others. This self-serving nature of altruism leaves a bitter aftertaste. It reveals that even the most selfless-seeming actions are often tainted by underlying selfishness. When the motivation is more about fulfilling one's own needs than about the well-being of others, the true spirit of altruism is lost. Ultimately, it raises the uncomfortable question of whether anyone can truly act selflessly, or if all good deeds are, at their core, just another way to serve our own desires. Manipulation is used for personal benefit. Manipulation is a disturbing yet common tactic people use to gain an advantage, often at the expense of others. It's not always overt or obvious. Manipulation can be subtle, taking the form of flattery, guilt-tripping, or even playing on someone's emotions to influence their decisions. The ultimate goal is personal gain, whether it's securing a job, getting a favor, or maintaining control over a situation. What makes manipulation so insidious is that it often operates under the guise of kindness or concern, masking the true intentions behind a veneer of friendliness or generosity. What's truly unsettling is the ease with which manipulation can be employed. In many cases, The manipulator doesn't even see themselves as doing anything wrong. They justify their actions as being for the greater good or as harmless tactics to get ahead. In relationships, this can be as simple as pretending to care about someone's feelings to get what you want, or convincing someone that their needs are secondary to your own. In business, it may involve promising something you never intend to deliver in order to close a deal. The most disturbing aspect of manipulation is how it undermines trust and authenticity. When someone manipulates another person, they distort the truth, create confusion, and exploit vulnerabilities, all to benefit themselves. Over time, this behavior erodes relationships and fosters a toxic environment where genuine connection is replaced by calculated moves and hidden agendas. Manipulation not only harms the victim, but it also diminishes the integrity of the person doing the manipulating, turning what could be honest interactions into transactional, self-serving exchanges. Convenience trumps principles. One of the most disturbing truths about human nature is how often convenience outweighs our principles. In a world that values speed, efficiency, and ease, many people find it all too easy to compromise their morals for the sake of convenience. Whether it's cutting corners at work, ignoring ethical concerns in favor of profit, or opting for a quick, selfish decision to avoid inconvenience, the pressure to take the easier path often leads individuals to sideline their core values. It's not always that people want to be dishonest or unethical, but the allure of a hassle-free solution makes it all too tempting to disregard what's right for what's easy. What makes this particularly unsettling is that, over time, the pursuit of convenience can erode one's sense of integrity. The more people choose the easy way out, the more they reinforce a mindset that values personal gain or comfort over the well-being of others or the commitment to their principles. It's the small compromises that add up, ignoring the environmental impact of a decision, tolerating poor behavior from a colleague to avoid conflict, or choosing self-interest over collective good. Each time, the principle fades a little more, and the convenience becomes the deciding factor. The emotional cost of this is profound. When convenience becomes the priority, the conscience is numbed and the individual risks becoming disconnected from their values. The cost isn't always immediate, but eventually, this erosion of principles can leave people feeling empty, knowing deep down that their choices don't align with who they truly are. In the end, the convenience that seems so appealing in the moment often leads to regret, as the true cost of abandoning principles becomes painfully clear. People deny their own biases. It's a disturbing truth that many people fail to recognize, let alone acknowledge, their own biases. Despite the fact that biases are universal and embedded in the very fabric of human cognition, most individuals believe they are objective, free from prejudice, and immune to the stereotypes that plague society. This denial is not just a form of self-deception, it's a defense mechanism designed to protect one's self-image. Admitting bias feels like admitting to moral failure or a lack of integrity, so most people choose to ignore the subtle ways in which their judgments are colored by unconscious preferences. What makes this particularly troubling is how this denial perpetuates systemic issues. When people are unwilling to confront their own biases, they unknowingly contribute to discriminatory practices, exclusion, and inequality. These biases can influence hiring decisions, social interactions, or even everyday choices, often without anyone realizing the damage they are causing. It's not that people intentionally seek to harm others, but the lack of awareness allows these biases to slip through undetected and unchecked. The emotional cost of denying bias is significant too. When people believe they are unbiased, they become defensive when confronted with their own prejudices, refusing to engage in meaningful reflection or growth. This avoidance stifles personal development and prevents society from having honest conversations about inequality and injustice. The inability to see one's own biases and the refusal to confront them not only limits personal understanding, but also perpetuates the very problems people claim to want to fix. It's a silent force that shapes behaviors, relationships, and systems, all while remaining out of sight. Humor hides pain and insecurity. Humor, while often seen as a source of joy and connection, is one of the most common masks people wear to cover their inner turmoil. The truth is that laughter can be a defense mechanism, a way to shield the world from the pain, fear, or insecurity lurking just beneath the surface. For many, cracking a joke or making others laugh is not just about spreading happiness. It's about keeping their vulnerability hidden, preventing others from seeing the cracks in their emotional armor. The jokes become a way to deflect attention, to keep others from asking too many questions, or to avoid confronting their own discomfort. Behind the laughter lies a person trying to cope with something much darker and deeper. What makes this especially unsettling is how effective humor is at masking real emotions. A person who seems perpetually upbeat and quick-witted may be suffering silently, using their humor to create distance between themselves and the pain they refuse to acknowledge. This coping mechanism can make it difficult for others to truly connect with them, as they are never given the chance to see the raw, unfiltered truth. In fact, humor can sometimes push people further away, as it makes the person seem untouchable or invulnerable, when in reality, they may be desperately seeking understanding and support. The danger of using humor as a mask is that it can delay healing. When we mask our true feelings with jokes, we avoid addressing the root cause of our pain, perpetuating a cycle of emotional repression. The longer we rely on humor to cover our insecurities, the harder it becomes to open up, to be vulnerable, and to find real connections that don't depend on the shield of laughter. Humans crave attention, often at others' expense. One of the darker truths about human nature is that the desire for attention often outweighs any concern for how it affects others. We are wired to seek validation, approval, and recognition from those around us, whether it's in social interactions, through social media, or in our professional lives. This craving for attention can push people to go to the extreme lengths, sometimes using others to secure the spotlight or elevate their own status, whether it's interrupting someone to make a point, exaggerating achievements, or even putting others down to make oneself look better. The need to be seen and heard often leads people to disregard the feelings and needs of those around them. What's especially unsettling is how deeply ingrained this need for attention is in the human psyche. From childhood, we seek approval from our parents, teachers, and peers. As we grow older, this desire doesn't fade. It evolves into an obsession with being noticed, praised, and admired. The rise of social media has only amplified this craving, creating platforms where likes, comments, and shares are used as measurements of worth. In this pursuit, many people begin to lose sight of the fact that real connections and meaningful relationships are built on mutual respect and understanding, not just the need to be seen or validated. The consequences of this behavior are often toxic. When attention becomes the driving force behind our actions, we start seeing others as tools to get what we want. This can lead to shallow relationships, manipulation, and a lack of genuine empathy. People become more focused on their own image than on the well-being of those around them, and the desire for attention can cause them to step on others, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to get ahead. The truth is that in the pursuit of recognition, humans often forget the true value of authentic connection. Envy drives much behavior. Envy is one of the most insidious and destructive emotions that can silently shape human behavior. It lurks beneath the surface, driving people to compete, sabotage, or even betray in the pursuit of what others have. While envy is often disguised as ambition or a desire for self-improvement, The truth is that it often stems from a deep dissatisfaction with one's own life, fueled by the comparison to others' perceived success or happiness. The pain of seeing someone else's achievements, possessions, or relationships triggers a toxic desire to possess what they have, not because it will bring true fulfillment, but because it feels like a balm for the inadequacies we feel within ourselves. What's particularly disturbing is how envy can masquerade as something positive. People might convince themselves that they're striving for success or excellence, when in fact, their motivations are rooted in jealousy and a desperate need to outdo those around them. This drives them to act in ways they might not even fully realize, such as seeking validation at others' expense, cutting corners, or even undermining those they envy. The more a person is consumed by envy, the more disconnected they become from their own goals and values, focusing instead on the illusion of superiority over others. Envy isn't just about material possessions. It can also extend to relationships, personal achievements, or lifestyle choices. The emotional toll it takes is immense, breeding resentment and dissatisfaction, often clouding judgment and fueling negativity. The more envy dictates actions, the further one moves from genuine happiness and fulfillment, trapped in an endless cycle of comparison and desire. Instead of celebrating personal growth, envy keeps individuals in a constant state of longing, unable to appreciate what they have because they're too fixated on what others possess. Fear of change blocks growth. The fear of change is one of the most powerful forces that hold people back from reaching their full potential. Change, by its very nature, is unpredictable, and the uncertainty it brings can trigger deep anxiety. It's easier to cling to the comfort of the familiar, even when that familiarity is stifling or unhealthy, than to take the risk of stepping into the unknown. People resist change, not because they are inherently opposed to growth, but because the fear of what might happen, failure, rejection, or the pain of transformation feels more threatening than the potential benefits. What makes this fear so disturbing is how it locks people in a cycle of stagnation. Even when the current situation is less than ideal, the thought of changing it often feels too overwhelming to act on. This fear breeds complacency, where individuals stay in jobs they dislike, relationships that drain them, or situations that limit their potential, simply because the alternative seems too daunting. The truth is, the discomfort of change often pales in comparison to the missed opportunities for growth, fulfillment, and progress that are sacrificed by staying stuck. This fear of change can also erode self-confidence. When people consistently avoid making changes, they reinforce the belief that they are incapable of handling the challenges that change brings. Over time, this belief weakens their ability to take risks or adapt to new circumstances, making it even harder to break free from the comfort zone. In the end, the fear of change not only blocks growth, but deepens the very insecurity and fear that fuel it, trapping people in a state of perpetual limitation. Confronting shortcomings is uncomfortable. Facing our own flaws, mistakes, and limitations is one of the most uncomfortable and painful experiences a person can endure. It forces us to confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore, the weaknesses that make us feel inadequate or vulnerable. Whether it's acknowledging our failures at work, facing the truth about our personal relationships, or simply admitting that we're not as capable as we like to believe, confronting these truths often feels unbearable. The discomfort comes not just from the fear of judgment from others, but from the deep internal conflict between how we wish to see ourselves and the reality of our shortcomings. What makes this truth so unsettling is that this avoidance of self-reflection leads to stagnation. We live in a culture that often praises strength, success, and perfection, making it difficult to admit when we are not measuring up. This fear of vulnerability can lead to defensiveness, denial, and even anger when others point out our flaws. The idea of being imperfect becomes so distressing that we push it away, only to watch it fester, preventing us from growing or improving. Confronting shortcomings requires the humility to admit that we are not flawless, that we are capable of making mistakes, and that there is always room for growth. This internal struggle creates an emotional wall. The longer we avoid facing our imperfections, the harder it becomes to change or evolve. It's a vicious cycle. We resist confronting the truth, and as a result, we remain stuck, unable to move forward. The discomfort of acknowledging our flaws may be intense, but it is also necessary for healing, growth, and ultimately a more authentic and fulfilled life. Without confronting our shortcomings, we deny ourselves the chance to become better versions of who we could be. Opinions are dismissed if they don't align with one's worldview. One of the most troubling aspects of human behavior is how easily people dismiss opinions that don't align with their own worldview. It's a deeply ingrained defense mechanism. When faced with ideas or perspectives that challenge our beliefs, the instinct is often to reject them outright, rather than engage with them thoughtfully. This dismissal of differing opinions isn't always intentional. Sometimes it's driven by an overwhelming need to protect one's identity, values, and comfort zone. Confronting conflicting viewpoints forces us to question everything we hold dear, and that can be an uncomfortable, even threatening experience. What makes this so disturbing is that it hinders true understanding and growth. Instead of engaging in meaningful dialogue or trying to understand where others are coming from, we often close ourselves off. Whether it's a political debate, a conversation about cultural differences, or simply a disagreement with a friend, if someone's opinion doesn't fit within the boundaries of our own worldview, we quickly label it as wrong, ill-informed, or dangerous. This mindset breeds echo chambers, where people are surrounded only by opinions and ideas that reinforce their existing beliefs, leaving no room for nuance or open-mindedness. The long-term effect is even more unsettling. By dismissing differing opinions, we create a world where empathy and compromise become increasingly difficult. It fosters division and polarization, making it harder for society to work together and find common ground. In the end, this refusal to consider alternate perspectives not only stunts personal growth, but also erodes the potential for meaningful, transformative conversations. It's a stark reminder that when we refuse to listen to others, we are often the ones who are most closed off. Politeness hides true feelings. Politeness, while essential in maintaining social harmony, often serves as a mask that conceals our true emotions. It's a protective shield designed to avoid conflict, maintain relationships, and present ourselves in a favorable light. But beneath the surface of carefully crafted smiles and well-chosen words, there lies a complex web of emotions that many people choose not to reveal. Whether it's discomfort, anger, disappointment, or even disgust, the pressure to remain polite often forces individuals to suppress their genuine feelings, pushing them deep within to avoid rocking the boat. What makes this truth so unsettling is how pervasive it is. People routinely hide their true thoughts and emotions for fear of being judged or rejected. In professional settings, social gatherings, or family dynamics, the fear of disrupting peace or appearing rude leads many to put on a facade, pretending everything is fine when it's not. This facade may seem harmless on the surface, but it creates a false sense of connection where true feelings go unspoken and real issues remain unresolved. The more we engage in this kind of polite masking, the more disconnected we become from our own emotions and from those around us as we fail to communicate honestly. The emotional toll is significant. Over time, the act of pretending can lead to feelings of isolation, as others never truly get to know the real person behind the polite exterior. It's a silent struggle where unspoken truths build up, creating an internal disconnect that can lead to frustration, resentment, and even emotional exhaustion. The fear of being impolite or causing discomfort often robs us of genuine, meaningful interactions and keeps us trapped in a cycle of emotional repression. Love leads to forgiveness, even when undeserved. One of the most emotionally complex and disturbing truths about human behavior is that love often compels people to forgive, even when the person they love doesn't deserve it. Love, in its purest form, fosters compassion and empathy, and it creates a deep emotional connection that is difficult to sever, even in the face of betrayal, hurt, or wrongdoing. The pain of being wronged may be overwhelming, but love can blur the lines of justice, making it easier to overlook faults, rationalize mistakes, or excuse harmful behavior. This is where forgiveness comes in, not because the wrongdoer has earned it, but because the love one feels outweighs the desire for retribution. What makes this truth particularly unsettling is how it can lead to the cycle of repeated hurt. People often forgive their loved ones because they want to believe in the goodness of the relationship or because they cannot bear the thought of losing someone they care about. However, this forgiveness can sometimes come at the cost of self-respect, as boundaries are crossed and trust is broken without consequence. Forgiving someone who doesn't deserve it may feel noble in the moment, but it can also enable toxic behavior to continue, as the person who is forgiven may never fully understand the depth of the hurt they've caused. What's most heartbreaking is that, in some cases, love leads to a form of self-sacrifice that leaves the one who forgives emotionally depleted. The desire to heal a relationship can cause them to ignore their own needs and feelings. The truth is, love's power to forgive, even when it's undeserved, reveals both the strength and vulnerability of the human heart. It can bind people together, but also leave them vulnerable to repeated pain. The truth is avoided if it challenges beliefs. One of the most disturbing truths about human nature is how often people will avoid the truth when it conflicts with their deeply held beliefs. Our beliefs shape our identities, our worldviews, and even how we interact with others. When confronted with information that contradicts these beliefs, it creates a cognitive dissonance, an uncomfortable mental conflict. Rather than face this discomfort, many will reject or dismiss the truth, no matter how evident it is. The fear of losing a belief that defines us can be so overwhelming that we cling to falsehoods or distortions of reality just to maintain that sense of security. What makes this truth particularly unsettling is how insidious it is. People will go to great lengths to justify their beliefs, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This is why debates, discussions, and even personal reflections often fail to change minds. When truth challenges what we believe, our first instinct is not to question ourselves, but to discredit or ignore the truth. Whether it's political ideologies, religious beliefs, or personal biases, the discomfort of being wrong outweighs the pursuit of actual truth for many. This behavior is not only destructive to individual growth, but to societal progress as well. When entire communities or groups reject truths because they contradict their beliefs, they perpetuate ignorance and division. The refusal to embrace uncomfortable truths traps people in a narrow perspective, preventing them from expanding their understanding of the world and themselves. Ultimately, by avoiding truth that challenges our beliefs, we not only harm our ability to grow intellectually, but we also build walls between us and the deeper, more complex realities that could enrich our lives. Most people live on autopilot. One of the most unsettling truths about human existence is that most people go through life on autopilot, moving from day to day without truly engaging with their surroundings or the choices they make. It's easy to slip into a routine, performing tasks out of habit, without ever pausing to reflect on whether these actions align with our deeper desires or values. This automatic way of living is comforting, as it requires little mental effort, but it also means that many people are merely going through the motions, disconnected from the present moment. Work, social obligations, and even relationships can become mechanical processes, with people following scripts rather than actively engaging in life. What makes this reality so disturbing is how it robs individuals of true fulfillment and self-awareness. When we live on autopilot, we aren't making conscious decisions. We're simply reacting to the world around us, often without asking why or how we're doing things. We might show up for work every day without ever questioning if we're in the right career, or we might maintain relationships that no longer serve us simply because it's easier than facing the discomfort of change. This lack of mindfulness leads to an existence driven by external demands rather than internal purpose. Even more troubling is the emotional cost. People who live on autopilot often experience a sense of numbness or emptiness, feeling disconnected from their own desires, passions, and emotions. The result is a life that feels shallow and unremarkable, leaving many to wonder where the years went. In a world that demands constant stimulation and instant gratification, it's easy to fall into a pattern of autopilot living, but the cost of this unconscious existence is high: the loss of agency, authenticity, and the ability to live with true intention. Irrational fears shape behavior. One of the most disturbing truths about human behavior is how irrational fears can have a profound and lasting impact on our actions. These fears, often rooted in childhood experiences or past traumas, don't always have a rational basis, yet they shape our decisions and interactions in ways that feel completely real. People may fear things that don't pose any real threat, such as public speaking, flying, or even social interactions, yet this fear can cause them to avoid these situations altogether. The most unsettling aspect of irrational fears is their ability to dominate our lives, controlling our actions, choices, and emotional responses, even when there's no real danger present. What makes these fears so insidious is how they often operate beneath the surface of conscious thought. Someone with a fear of rejection might avoid pursuing meaningful relationships or opportunities, not because they've been hurt in the past, but because they fear it happening again, despite no evidence to suggest it will. Similarly, a person afraid of failure may shy away from any challenge or risk, even though their fear is disproportionate to the actual likelihood of failure. These irrational fears limit personal growth, as the person remains trapped in a state of avoidance, constantly making decisions based on worst-case scenarios rather than reality. The emotional toll of irrational fears is profound. They create a constant undercurrent of anxiety, preventing people from living fully and embracing new experiences. What's even more disturbing is how these fears often go unrecognized, making individuals feel trapped in their own minds. The longer these irrational fears are allowed to control behavior, the harder it becomes to break free, leading to a life dictated by invisible chains, keeping us from realizing our full potential. Projecting flaws onto others avoids facing them. One of the most unsettling psychological truths is that people often project their own flaws onto others as a defense mechanism. Rather than confronting their own shortcomings, individuals subconsciously cast those very flaws onto the people around them. This projection serves as a shield, protecting them from the uncomfortable reality of acknowledging their own imperfections. It's easier to blame others for the things we dislike in ourselves than to confront the painful truth that those qualities reside within us. This behavior isn't just about avoiding discomfort. It's a way to maintain a sense of superiority or control, all while avoiding self-reflection. What makes this tendency so disturbing is how deeply ingrained it is. People often aren't aware they are doing it. Instead of facing the feelings of guilt, shame, or insecurity that may come with acknowledging their flaws, they externalize those emotions and criticize or judge others for displaying the very traits they're trying to deny. Whether it's projecting anger, jealousy, or fear, this defense mechanism distorts relationships and fosters a toxic environment of blame and judgment. The truth is, projection creates a cycle where individuals never truly grow or change, as they continue to deflect responsibility for their own issues onto others. Even more troubling is the emotional toll it takes on those around them. The person being projected upon is left feeling misunderstood, unjustly criticized, or even hurt by accusations that are not their own. The irony lies in how projection can both protect and destroy. It protects the individual from facing their flaws, but in doing so, it destroys any chance of genuine self-awareness and emotional growth. In the end, projecting flaws onto others keeps individuals locked in a cycle of denial, isolating them from meaningful self-improvement and connection. Privileges are often taken for granted. One of the most uncomfortable truths is how easily people take their privileges for granted, often unaware of the advantages they possess simply by virtue of their circumstances. Whether it's race, wealth, education, or social connections, many people go through life never fully acknowledging the privileges they've been given. These advantages shape their experiences, opportunities, and perceptions of the world, but because they are ingrained in daily life, they often go unnoticed. It's not that people consciously disregard their privileges, but rather that they view their own reality as the default, failing to recognize how different it might be for others without those same advantages. What makes this particularly unsettling is the subtlety of privilege. It doesn't always come in obvious forms, and those who benefit from it often believe their success or comfort is entirely due to their own hard work and merit. The truth is, privilege provides a set of unearned advantages that allow certain people to move through life with fewer obstacles, often without realizing how much easier their path has been. This ignorance can lead to a lack of empathy, as those with privilege may fail to see the struggles of others who don't share the same advantages. By taking privileges for granted, we perpetuate inequality. It creates a world where the privileged are often blind to the difficulties faced by others, reinforcing cycles of injustice and division. This ignorance prevents meaningful change as it fosters a sense of complacency. Those who benefit from privilege often feel little motivation to challenge systems that continue to favor them. The uncomfortable reality is that privilege, when unacknowledged, not only distances us from understanding others, but keeps us from creating a more equitable and empathetic society. Randomness is mistaken for patterns. One of the most disturbing truths about human perception is how easily we mistake randomness for meaningful patterns. Our brains are wired to seek order and make sense of the world around us, which is an essential survival trait. However, this instinct often leads us to find patterns where none exist. From spotting faces in clouds to reading into coincidences, we have a tendency to create connections between unrelated events. We convince ourselves that there is purpose behind chaos, that every random occurrence has some hidden meaning. This is the basis for superstitions, conspiracy theories, and a false sense of control in an unpredictable world. What makes this truth so unsettling is the power it gives to illusion. Humans are drawn to patterns because they provide a sense of predictability, control, and understanding. When something random happens, like a string of unfortunate events or a random success, we desperately try to impose a narrative on it. The mind doesn't want to accept that life is chaotic and unpredictable, so it finds connections, often over-interpreting the most trivial of coincidences. This leads people to make faulty decisions based on false patterns, trusting in things that are entirely random. The danger lies in the consequences of these false beliefs. People act on these misperceived patterns, whether by making irrational investments based on supposed lucky signs or altering their behavior based on superstition. The real problem is that this creates an illusion of understanding and control, making it even harder to navigate the unpredictable nature of life. In the end, What seems like a reassuring pattern is often just randomness, and the more we believe in these illusions, the more we set ourselves up for failure. Difficult truths are avoided to escape emotional pain. One of the most unsettling aspects of human behavior is our tendency to avoid confronting difficult truths, especially when they threaten to bring emotional pain. It's easier, in the short term, to deny reality, suppress our feelings, or distract ourselves, rather than face uncomfortable truths about ourselves, others, or life in general. Whether it's ignoring the signs of an unhealthy relationship, avoiding the reality of personal failure, or denying the existence of deeper emotional issues, people often choose to live in a state of denial. This avoidance provides a temporary sense of relief, shielding us from the raw pain that comes with accepting the truth. However, the longer these truths are avoided, the more they fester, ultimately growing into even larger emotional burdens. What makes this truth so disturbing is the long-term impact that avoidance has on mental and emotional well-being. When we avoid difficult truths, we prevent ourselves from fully processing our emotions and resolving inner conflicts. Instead, we carry these unresolved issues like a weight on our shoulders, which can lead to stress, anxiety, and even depression. People may develop coping mechanisms like distraction, addiction, or self-deception to protect themselves from facing the truth, but these are only temporary solutions that offer no real healing. Over time, the truth becomes harder to ignore, yet the emotional pain of confronting it becomes even more overwhelming. The real danger lies in how much emotional energy is spent avoiding the inevitable. We may think we are protecting ourselves, but in reality, we are slowly poisoning our own well-being, sacrificing peace of mind for the illusion of comfort. It's a painful cycle where avoidance only deepens the wound, leaving us stuck in a constant state of emotional paralysis, afraid to face what we know must eventually be confronted. Emotional numbness is a defense mechanism. Emotional numbness is one of the most unsettling ways the mind protects itself from overwhelming pain or trauma. When faced with intense emotional stress, whether from loss, betrayal, or unresolved trauma, the mind instinctively shuts down feelings as a survival mechanism. It's as if the emotional pain becomes so unbearable that the brain responds by creating a buffer, numbing the individual's ability to feel. While this defense mechanism might seem protective in the short term, it comes at a high emotional cost. The numbness isn't selective. It dulls not only the pain, but also the joy, love, and connection that make life meaningful. What makes emotional numbness so disturbing is how it quietly erodes the individual's sense of self and connection to the world. Over time, it's easy to mistake numbness for emotional resilience. People might convince themselves they are moving on or handling things well, when in reality, they have simply shut off their ability to feel. This creates a hollow existence where life becomes a series of motions, going through the days without truly experiencing them. Relationships suffer as the person may withdraw emotionally, unable to connect with others on a deeper level, and personal growth stagnates because emotions are the very fuel for self-discovery and healing. The longer emotional numbness persists, the harder it becomes to break out of it. The longer one suppresses their emotions, the more entrenched the numbness becomes, leading to a cycle of isolation and disconnection. The most heartbreaking part is that, in protecting themselves from the initial pain, individuals may inadvertently create a life devoid of the depth and richness that emotions provide. Emotional numbness, while a defense, ultimately keeps people from fully living, from feeling, and from healing. Words can unintentionally harm. One of the most insidious truths about communication is that words, even when spoken with no ill intent, can still cause deep harm. The impact of language goes far beyond the surface. It can shape emotions, influence perceptions, and even alter the course of relationships. What makes this especially disturbing is that many people are unaware of the damage their words can inflict. A seemingly harmless comment, a thoughtless joke, or a well-meaning piece of advice can leave lasting scars. What is said in passing or without considering the recipient's feelings can be the very thing that triggers insecurity, pain, or self-doubt. The reality is that words carry weight. They can reinforce stereotypes, perpetuate biases, or invalidate someone's experiences, often without the speaker ever realizing the effect they've had. The person on the receiving end may internalize these words, letting them shape their sense of self, their worth, or their view of the world. Even if the harm was unintentional, it doesn't erase the emotional impact. The sting of hurtful words lingers, often far longer than we anticipate. This truth becomes even more unsettling when we realize that it's so easy to harm someone with words, yet so difficult to undo that harm. Apologies may be offered, but the damage to trust, confidence, and emotional well-being may never fully heal. In a world where so much is communicated through words, we must become more mindful of their power and potential to hurt, even when we don't mean to. The unintentional harm caused by words is a silent force that can unravel relationships and leave deep emotional wounds that are hard to see but difficult to forget. Vulnerability is feared at all costs. One of the most deeply ingrained fears in human nature is the fear of vulnerability. Opening up to others, revealing our true selves, and exposing our emotions feels like an invitation for rejection, judgment, or even exploitation. In a world that often values strength, success, and invulnerability, showing weakness is seen as dangerous. This fear of being vulnerable leads many to build walls around themselves, masking their true feelings, hiding their insecurities, and presenting only a curated version of themselves to the world. The desire to protect our emotional safety can cause us to shut others out, keeping real connections at bay. What makes this truth so disturbing is the deep emotional cost it carries. While we avoid vulnerability to protect ourselves, we simultaneously rob ourselves of the opportunity for genuine human connection. Vulnerability is the foundation of trust, intimacy, and real understanding in relationships, but fearing it means missing out on authentic connections. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that by avoiding vulnerability, we're protecting ourselves from hurt or rejection. However, what we're actually doing is isolating ourselves and preventing the emotional growth that comes from being truly seen and heard. The irony is that the more we avoid vulnerability, the more we perpetuate feelings of loneliness and disconnection. The fear of being judged or hurt keeps us locked in a cycle of emotional distance, making it harder to build meaningful relationships or experience true emotional fulfillment. Vulnerability, though terrifying, is the key to breaking free from this cycle. Yet, for many, the cost of opening up feels too high, keeping them trapped in a world of self-imposed isolation. Self-importance leads to illogical thinking. One of the most disturbing aspects of human behavior is how self-importance often clouds judgment and leads to illogical thinking. When people begin to inflate their own sense of significance, they start to believe that their opinions, desires, and needs are inherently more valuable than those of others. This inflated sense of self can warp their perception of reality, causing them to ignore facts, dismiss other perspectives, and make decisions based on ego rather than reason. The more one believes in their own superiority, the less likely they are to consider alternative viewpoints, and the more likely they are to make decisions that are disconnected from reality. What makes this truth so unsettling is that self-importance often operates beneath the surface. People who have an exaggerated sense of their own worth rarely recognize how their thinking becomes distorted by their need for validation and control. They may surround themselves with yes men, refuse to acknowledge their mistakes, and reject criticism, all of which reinforce their delusions of grandeur. Over time, this illogical thinking can lead to poor decisions, ineffective leadership, and damaged relationships, as their actions become driven by the need to protect their inflated self-image rather than by rational analysis or empathy. The emotional cost of self-importance is profound. It isolates individuals, making them less open to learning, growth, and collaboration. The more entrenched they become in their own superiority, the harder it becomes to see the world through the eyes of others. Instead of making decisions based on logic or facts, they operate on the belief that they are always right. In the end, self-importance doesn't just distort thinking, it erodes genuine connection and prevents true self-awareness, leaving individuals trapped in a cycle of delusion and poor judgment. People choose the path of least resistance. One of the most uncomfortable truths about human behavior is how often people choose the path of least resistance, even when it leads to mediocrity or unhappiness. The instinct to take the easiest route is deeply ingrained in us, driven by the desire for comfort and the avoidance of pain. When faced with difficult choices or challenges, the brain naturally gravitates toward the option that requires the least effort, even if it's not the best long-term solution. This drive to minimize discomfort often leads individuals to settle for what's convenient, familiar, rather than pushing through challenges that might bring greater fulfillment or growth. What makes this truth so disturbing is how it shapes lives in ways that are easy to overlook. People might take jobs they don't enjoy because they're too afraid of the effort required to change careers. They might stay in toxic relationships because the discomfort of change feels more unbearable than the status quo. The path of least resistance often leads to stagnation, where individuals feel trapped in a cycle of unfulfilled potential, unable or unwilling to step outside their comfort zone. The emotional cost of choosing ease over growth is profound. While the easy choice provides temporary relief, it leads to long-term dissatisfaction, regret, and a sense of missed opportunity. People often look back on their lives, realizing that their reluctance to face challenges has left them with unfulfilled dreams and untapped potential. Choosing the path of least resistance may offer immediate comfort, but it's the harder, more challenging paths that ultimately lead to personal growth, success, and a sense of accomplishment. Overestimating control is common. One of the most unsettling truths about human nature is the tendency to overestimate our control over situations and outcomes. People often believe they have more influence over their lives, decisions, and environments than they actually do. This illusion of control can be comforting. It gives us a sense of security and agency in a world that often feels unpredictable and chaotic. But the truth is, much of life is shaped by forces beyond our control, external circumstances, other people's actions, chance, and even our own unconscious biases. Yet, despite this, many people convince themselves that they can control outcomes, and this overconfidence can lead to poor decisions and unnecessary stress. The danger of overestimating control lies in the emotional toll it takes when things inevitably don't go as planned. When life doesn't align with our expectations, we often blame ourselves, feeling as though we failed or didn't try hard enough. This can lead to feelings of frustration, anxiety, and even depression as we hold ourselves accountable for factors we never had the power to influence. The more we believe we can control everything, the more devastating the sense of loss or helplessness feels when reality doesn't cooperate. This overestimation also affects how we interact with others and approach challenges. We may make decisions with the expectation of a perfect outcome, only to be blindsided by the unpredictable nature of life. It creates an emotional vulnerability as we become attached to a sense of control that is largely illusory. Ultimately, overestimating our control not only sets us up for disappointment, but keeps us from accepting the uncertainties of life with grace and resilience. Defense of wrong actions is normal. One of the more unsettling truths about human behavior is how easily people defend actions they know are wrong. When faced with the consequences of a poor decision, whether it's a lie, a betrayal, or an unethical choice, the instinct is often not to admit fault, but to justify and rationalize the behavior. This defense mechanism is deeply rooted in the human need to protect one's self-image. The idea of being wrong feels like a threat to our identity, so we scramble to shift the narrative and find ways to make our actions seem acceptable. It's a natural impulse, but one that erodes integrity and truth. What makes this so disturbing is the ease with which people can convince themselves that their wrongdoings aren't that bad, or that they had no other choice. Whether it's downplaying the severity of an offense, blaming others, or constructing elaborate justifications, the mind works overtime to make wrong actions feel justified. A person might cheat and say, "Everyone does it," or lie and explain, "I didn't want to hurt their feelings." The discomfort of guilt is quickly overshadowed by the relief that comes from avoiding responsibility. The danger is that when people routinely defend their wrong actions, they start to lose sight of what's truly right. This behavior becomes habitual, normalizing dishonesty, manipulation, and unethical choices. It creates a moral gray area where right and wrong are no longer clearly defined, and what's most disturbing is how these justifications often lead to a cycle of harmful actions, where the original mistake is never truly addressed and the damage continues to spread. Ultimately, defending wrong actions not only compromises one's moral integrity, but also poisons relationships and trust. Validation from others trumps inner happiness. One of the most disturbing truths about human nature is how often we allow external validation to take precedence over our own sense of inner happiness. In a world dominated by social media, public opinions, and the constant pressure to meet societal expectations, the need for approval from others can become overpowering. The desire to be liked, admired, or recognized can lead people to shape their behaviors, decisions, and even their values around what others think, instead of what they truly need or believe. The disturbing part is that this external validation becomes a measure of self-worth, leaving individuals feeling incomplete or unfulfilled without it. What makes this truth so unsettling is how easily we fall into the trap of seeking approval from others, whether it's through likes on social media, praise from peers, or recognition at work. The temporary high of validation becomes addictive. We start to tie our happiness to external sources, often at the cost of our own peace of mind. In this cycle, people may neglect their authentic desires, chasing after what others expect of them, or even what society dictates is success, while their own needs are pushed aside. The deeper the dependency on external validation, the further away true inner happiness becomes. The emotional toll is immense. The more we seek approval from the outside world, the less connected we are to ourselves. We lose touch with what genuinely brings us joy, because we are too busy trying to live up to someone else's standards. In the end, relying on external validation leaves us perpetually unsatisfied, unable to find contentment within, because we've anchored our sense of self-worth to something as fleeting and unpredictable as the opinions of others. Blame is shifted to external factors. One of the most pervasive and disturbing truths about human behavior is the tendency to shift blame to external factors, rather than accepting responsibility for one's own actions. When things go wrong, people often look outside themselves, at circumstances, other people, or even bad luck, rather than facing the uncomfortable truth that they played a role in the situation. This tendency is a defense mechanism, a way to protect one's self-esteem and avoid the painful emotions of guilt or shame. It's easier to blame the environment, society, or the actions of others than to confront the reality that our own decisions, however small, contributed to the outcome. What makes this behavior so toxic is its ability to prevent growth. Shifting blame stifles self-reflection and accountability, which are essential for personal development. By refusing to own up to their mistakes, individuals trap themselves in a cycle of denial and avoidance. They remain stuck in a pattern where they are unable to learn from their failures or take meaningful action to change their circumstances. Instead of using failures as an opportunity for growth, they reinforce the idea that the world is unfair and that they are merely victims of circumstances beyond their control. This externalization of blame also creates a toxic environment in relationships, workplaces, and society. When people refuse to take responsibility for their actions, it leads to frustration, resentment, and a breakdown of trust. Others feel as if they are constantly being blamed for issues that are not their fault, leading to conflict and division. The truth is that blaming external factors may provide temporary relief, but it comes at the cost of personal integrity and meaningful progress. It's a self-defeating habit that ensures the individual remains powerless to change their reality. Fear of irrelevance shapes decisions. One of the most powerful and disturbing truths about human behavior is the fear of irrelevance and how it silently shapes our choices. The fear of being forgotten, overlooked, or left behind can be so overwhelming that it drives people to make decisions that are not aligned with their true desires or values, but rather with the need to stay visible, valued, or important. This fear is particularly potent in a world that celebrates constant achievement, recognition, and status. It pushes people to seek attention, to prove their worth, and to chase after fleeting forms of validation, often at the cost of their authenticity or well-being. What makes this fear so unsettling is that it can lead people to prioritize superficial markers of success. Social media likes, professional titles, or material wealth over deeper, more meaningful pursuits. The fear of becoming irrelevant causes individuals to latch onto any opportunity that promises visibility or recognition, even if it means compromising their integrity, neglecting relationships, or sacrificing personal happiness. This drive to stay relevant often leads people to live for others' approval rather than for their own fulfillment, making them vulnerable to manipulation and emotional exhaustion. The long-term effects of this fear are profound. When relevance becomes the measure of one's worth, life becomes a series of performances, constantly trying to stay ahead, to be seen, and to matter. But the harder people strive for relevance, the more they lose touch with who they truly are, caught in an endless cycle of seeking validation from external sources. In the end, the fear of irrelevance doesn't just shape decisions. It traps people in a life that is not their own, where the pursuit of importance eclipses the pursuit of happiness. Manipulation is used to feel superior. One of the darker truths of human behavior is that manipulation is often employed as a tool for boosting one's sense of superiority. In many cases, people don't manipulate others out of malice, but to gain power, control, or validation. The act of subtly influencing or controlling someone else's actions and thoughts can provide a fleeting sense of dominance, a way to feel more in control of a situation or more important than others. It taps into an ego-driven need to prove one's worth, often at the expense of others' well-being or autonomy. By steering people in the direction they want, manipulators feel more powerful, more in control, more significant. What makes this truth so unsettling is how often manipulation is disguised as care or concern. Manipulative individuals will often hide their true intentions behind a veil of kindness or friendship, making it difficult for others to recognize the manipulation until they've already been affected. Whether it's flattering someone to get them to do something, guilt-tripping them into compliance, or using subtle tactics to control a conversation, the goal is to elevate oneself while diminishing others in the process. The manipulator might convince themselves that their actions are justified, that they're doing what's best for the person being manipulated or even society at large. But at its core, the behavior is driven by a need for personal superiority. What's especially disturbing is the long-term impact of manipulation. The more people rely on it to elevate themselves, the more they erode the trust and authenticity in their relationships. Over time, manipulation destroys genuine connections, leaving behind shallow, transactional interactions built on power dynamics rather than mutual respect. Ultimately, the person who uses manipulation to feel superior may find themselves isolated, surrounded by people they have controlled but never truly connected with. Entitlement is often felt, even when undeserved. One of the most disturbing aspects of human behavior is the pervasive sense of entitlement that many people feel, often without justification. This feeling that one deserves special treatment, privileges, or rewards, regardless of whether they've earned it, can be dangerously pervasive. It's not always about wealth or status. Sometimes it's the expectation that life should bend to our desires, that we are inherently deserving of things, or that others owe us something. Whether it's expecting praise for doing the bare minimum, demanding respect without offering it, or feeling angered when things don't go as we think they should, entitlement seeps into everyday life, distorting expectations and relationships. What makes this truth particularly unsettling is how entitlement leads to irrational expectations. People with this mindset often believe they are entitled to certain outcomes, regardless of their actions or the effort they've put in. They may feel overlooked when they don't receive recognition, become frustrated when things don't go their way, or become resentful when others receive rewards they believe are rightfully theirs. This sense of entitlement often leads to a cycle of disappointment, as life doesn't always meet inflated expectations, and when it doesn't, resentment and bitterness take root. The emotional damage caused by entitlement is significant. It isolates people from others because they fail to appreciate the effort and struggles of those around them. It breeds arrogance and a lack of gratitude, leaving individuals constantly dissatisfied, never content with what they have or what they've earned. Ultimately, entitlement warps self-perception, making it difficult to recognize the value of humility, hard work, or genuine appreciation. It's a dangerous mindset that keeps people trapped in a cycle of unmet expectations and unearned disappointment. Avoiding past mistakes feels easier than confronting them. One of the most unsettling truths about human behavior is how often people avoid confronting their past mistakes, opting instead to bury them deep in their minds. The discomfort of facing the consequences of one's actions, the guilt, shame, or regret that arises from reflecting on poor decisions is so overwhelming that it becomes easier to deny or repress those memories. It's a defense mechanism, self-preservation at its core, that protects the individual from reliving the emotional pain associated with their failures. However, this avoidance, while seemingly easier in the moment, creates an ongoing internal conflict, preventing the person from learning, growing, or moving forward. What makes this behavior so damaging is that by avoiding past mistakes, individuals miss the opportunity to heal or change. The mistakes we make, though painful, are often our greatest teachers. They reveal our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses, and the areas in which we need to grow. But when we refuse to face them, we deny ourselves the chance to understand our behaviors and make better decisions in the future. The discomfort of confronting those failures may feel unbearable, but the cost of avoidance is far worse: perpetual stagnation, self-deception, and a life governed by the same unlearned patterns. What's truly disturbing is how this avoidance can seep into every aspect of life. By not dealing with past mistakes, people often continue to make the same ones over and over, trapping themselves in a cycle of repetition. The emotional toll is profound. The weight of unresolved issues accumulates, leaving the individual stuck in a constant state of internal conflict. Avoiding past mistakes may feel easier in the short term, but it robs the person of growth, self-awareness, and ultimately, peace. Convenience trumps loyalty. One of the most troubling truths about human behavior is that when faced with a choice between convenience and loyalty, many people will choose the path of least resistance. In a world that demands quick fixes, immediate gratification, and minimal effort, loyalty often takes a back seat. Whether it's in relationships, friendships, or even business dealings, people frequently prioritize convenience, what's easier, faster, or more comfortable, over staying true to the people or values they claim to care about. This tendency reveals a deeply ingrained need to avoid discomfort, conflict, or the sacrifice that loyalty sometimes requires. What makes this so disturbing is how easily loyalty can be discarded in favor of immediate rewards or simplicity. A friend might be abandoned for the convenience of a more popular or advantageous social group, or a long-term partner might be neglected when a new, more effortless connection arises. In business, customers may be abandoned for a cheaper product or a quicker service, even if it means betraying a long-standing relationship. The drive for convenience makes it easy to rationalize disloyal actions, as the immediate benefits often seem to outweigh the long-term cost of betrayal. The emotional cost of this behavior is significant. When loyalty is cast aside in favor of convenience, trust is broken, relationships are damaged, and the sense of personal integrity is compromised. This creates a world where people are more likely to act in self-interest, abandoning others when it no longer suits them. Ultimately, choosing convenience over loyalty undermines the very foundation of meaningful connections, leaving behind a trail of fractured bonds and a deeper sense of emptiness. Rejection is unbearable and avoided. One of the most profound and painful truths about human behavior is that rejection is often felt as unbearable, driving people to go to extreme lengths to avoid it. Whether it's a job interview, a romantic relationship, or even social interactions, the fear of rejection taps into our deepest insecurities. As social creatures, we are hardwired to seek connection, acceptance, and belonging. Rejection threatens that sense of belonging and, in some ways, challenges our very worth. It's not just about the fear of being told no. It's the emotional pain of feeling inadequate, unworthy, or unlovable. The weight of that emotional discomfort is so intense that, for many, the mere thought of being rejected is enough to deter them from taking risks at all. What makes this truth so unsettling is how it shapes behavior in profound ways. People often shy away from opportunities, avoid vulnerability, and choose the safety of inaction over the possibility of rejection. It manifests in all areas of life, from avoiding confrontation to not asking for help, from staying in unfulfilling relationships to not pursuing dreams, simply because the risk of rejection feels too painful to bear. The fear of rejection can be so overpowering that it stifles personal growth, creativity, and genuine connections. Even more disturbing is how this fear can distort reality. The threat of rejection becomes exaggerated in the mind, making it seem far worse than it actually is. In truth, rejection is a natural part of life, a temporary setback rather than a reflection of one's worth. But the fear of it, if unchecked, can lead to a life lived in the shadows, avoiding opportunities and interactions that could lead to real connection and fulfillment. By constantly avoiding rejection, we sacrifice the chance to live authentically and fully. Fear of being alone traps people in toxic relationships. One of the most painful and disturbing truths about human behavior is how the fear of loneliness can keep people locked in toxic relationships. The terror of being by oneself, of feeling abandoned or isolated, can feel so overwhelming that many will tolerate emotional abuse, neglect, or dysfunction just to avoid being alone. The idea of facing the world without a partner, no matter how unhealthy the relationship, becomes so paralyzing that people choose the familiarity of misery over the uncertainty of solitude. This fear distorts the perception of what a healthy relationship should be, making individuals believe that any connection, even a damaging one, is better than no connection at all. What makes this truth even more unsettling is how insidious this fear can be. People often convince themselves that they need to fix the relationship, that the pain they're experiencing is just temporary, or that they can't possibly survive without the companionship of the person who is hurting them. In reality, the fear of being alone clouds their judgment, making them blind to the fact that being alone doesn't equate to being unloved or unworthy. Rather, it can be a space for healing, self-discovery, and the building of a life based on self-love and independence. Yet, for those trapped in toxic relationships, this fear keeps them tethered to a cycle of emotional pain and insecurity. The emotional toll of this fear is devastating. It erodes self-esteem and self-worth, making people believe that they are not enough on their own. It can lead to years of personal stagnation, emotional exhaustion, and even depression. The longer they stay in a toxic relationship out of fear, the more disconnected they become from their true selves, caught in a paradox where the fear of loneliness becomes a cage that keeps them from finding the peace and happiness that only independence and self-love can offer. Material possessions define self-worth. It's a deeply troubling reality that, for many people, material possessions become the primary measure of self-worth. Society constantly reinforces the idea that success, happiness, and status are tied to what we own. From designer clothes to expensive cars to the latest technology, people often equate their possessions with their value as individuals. The more they acquire, the more they feel they have worth, and when they don't have what others have, they feel less than. It's a dangerous cycle because it leads to an endless pursuit of material goods in an attempt to fill an inner void, all while reinforcing the belief that possessions define who we are. What makes this dynamic so disturbing is the emotional emptiness it leaves behind. People who tie their identity to what they own are never truly satisfied, no matter how much they acquire. The joy of a new purchase is fleeting, and the thrill wears off, leaving behind a constant craving for more. This creates an endless loop of acquisition, where the pursuit of material goods becomes a substitute for real fulfillment, connection, and purpose. The true self gets lost in the need to project an image of success, leaving little room for genuine happiness or self-acceptance. The most unsettling part is the deep insecurity it breeds. When material possessions define self-worth, anything less than perfection can lead to feelings of inadequacy or failure. People begin to judge themselves and others by superficial standards, forgetting that true value lies not in things, but in character, relationships, and personal growth. The tragic reality is that in the pursuit of external validation, many lose sight of who they truly are, trapped in a never-ending cycle of consumption that offers no real sense of meaning or lasting satisfaction. Stereotypes are often unconsciously applied. One of the most uncomfortable truths about human behavior is how often stereotypes are unconsciously applied, shaping how we perceive and treat others. Despite our best intentions, our brains rely on mental shortcuts, cognitive biases that allow us to quickly categorize people based on their appearance, background, or behavior. These shortcuts are influenced by societal norms, media portrayals, and personal experiences, and they occur without us even realizing it. As a result, we often make snap judgments about people, assuming certain traits, behaviors, or abilities based solely on superficial characteristics such as race, gender, or socioeconomic status. What makes this particularly disturbing is that these unconscious biases are not always easy to recognize, even by those who are genuinely committed to fairness and equality. We may not consciously endorse harmful stereotypes, but they still shape our decisions, interactions, and judgments. For instance, we may unconsciously assume someone is less competent based on their accent or appearance, or we might treat a person differently because they belong to a certain group. These judgments, though often subtle, can have profound consequences, affecting hiring decisions, educational opportunities, and social relationships. The danger of unconscious stereotyping is that it perpetuates inequality and division. It reinforces stereotypes by treating individuals based on preconceived notions rather than seeing them for who they truly are. And because we're often unaware of our biases, it becomes difficult to correct them or break free from these patterns. Ultimately, unconscious stereotypes keep us trapped in a cycle of judgment where people are seen not as individuals, but as representatives of a group, denying them the opportunity to be understood on their own terms. Anger remains unresolved for many. One of the most unsettling truths about human emotions is that anger often lingers unresolved, festering beneath the surface and quietly influencing our behavior. People tend to suppress their anger rather than confront it directly, either because it feels too uncomfortable, they fear the consequences of expressing it, or they don't know how to deal with it healthily. Instead of dealing with the root cause of their anger, many choose to ignore or bury it, thinking it will dissipate on its own. But the reality is that unresolved anger doesn't vanish. It builds up, silently poisoning relationships and eroding emotional well-being. Over time, it can lead to resentment, passive-aggressive behavior, or even emotional detachment. What makes this truth so disturbing is how deeply unresolved anger can impact a person's life. It doesn't just disappear, it seeps into interactions, creating distance between people and making them less capable of truly connecting. Individuals may find themselves snapping at others over trivial matters, unable to trace the outbursts back to the anger they've been holding on to. Alternatively, some may withdraw completely, avoiding confrontation and allowing the anger to fester in isolation. This silent internal battle can lead to anxiety, depression, and a breakdown in communication, making it difficult to resolve the underlying issues. The consequences of unresolved anger are far-reaching. It doesn't just hurt the person holding on to it, it damages relationships, distorts perspectives, and prevents emotional healing. What's truly alarming is how easy it is to overlook this deep, unresolved anger, rationalizing it as just a part of life or nothing serious. But in reality, the longer anger is left unchecked, the more it controls our lives, pushing us further from resolution, peace, and authentic connection. Validation from others is often sought over self-acceptance. One of the most troubling aspects of human behavior is the intense need for external validation, often placed above the far more powerful and lasting pursuit of self-acceptance. In a world where social media, approval, and recognition from others are constantly emphasized, many people find themselves seeking validation from external sources rather than cultivating an inner sense of worth. Whether it's through likes, compliments, or praise, the desire to be seen, acknowledged, and admired can dominate our actions and decisions. The problem is that this validation is fleeting, superficial, and often entirely dependent on others' opinions, leaving individuals trapped in a cycle of constantly seeking approval to feel good about themselves. What makes this truth particularly disturbing is how much it distorts self-perception. People become so consumed with seeking others' validation that they lose sight of their own values, desires, and self-worth. They shape their actions, appearance, and even personality around what they think will gain approval, rather than embracing who they truly are. The longer this external validation is sought, the further one drifts from authentic self-acceptance, creating a sense of emptiness that can never be truly filled by others' opinions. The emotional toll is profound. This constant need for external affirmation erodes self-esteem as people begin to measure their worth against the fluctuating opinions of others. When that validation is absent, feelings of inadequacy and insecurity take root, leading to anxiety, depression, and even a distorted sense of self. Ultimately, when validation from others is prioritized over self-acceptance, people are left with an unstable foundation of self-worth, one that can be shattered in an instant by rejection or criticism. True peace and happiness come not from the approval of others, but from the quiet confidence that comes with fully embracing and accepting oneself.